School Board meeting is being called to order for June 11th, 2020 School Board Business Meeting. And if you're willing and able, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to welcome our audience who are watching on Crevalle School District YouTube channel. And I want to thank everyone who's listening to us. The first item on the agenda is board member reports. So do we have any school board members who would wish to provide school district related reports? I do see Sarah's hand up. Sarah?
It's not specific to our school district, but I was in a Zoom meeting with the OSBA Legislative Policy Committee this morning. We moved to put our to move our priorities forward to all of OSBA and included a preamble statement on equity, and there will be a revision that will include racial justice. So that was a positive development with that this morning.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other board member reports? So I do have a brief one from the foundation. Actually, Therese, go ahead. I think I saw your hands up momentarily.
Oh, you did, and then I was like, wait, maybe this isn't the moment to do it. But I just want to make sure before we go any further, we congratulate the newest doctor on our team, because that was pretty awesome. And so I really wish we could be having that, we could be in the same room to celebrate that. But congratulations, Dr. White-Bearer, and we're clapping for you from our rooms, from our different spaces.
Thanks, you. I appreciate that. I wish we could share that moment together too. Yeah, thank you.
That day will come soon. And congratulations, Dr. Luhoyi White-Bear. I had really the honor to listen to your amazing dissertation, and it's been very informative. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's very relevant, and we're so proud to have your input and your knowledge within the board. I think your experience, professional experience, will bring a lot of depth into our work on the board and beyond.
Thank you.
Any other reports? And just to have everyone know, we will have board comments. We leave it usually toward the end of the meeting, so there will be board member comments at the end of the meeting if anyone is listening to us right now. I just want to provide one brief update from the foundation, Crevalle Public School Foundation. They unanimously voted to welcome their newest trustee, City Councilor Ed Junkins, who you all know is a former Crevalle School Board member and was our liaison to the foundation, was a champion of several aspects in our board goal setting, including the health and wellness. His input and his involvement has been great. He was the speaker of the Public Foundation breakfast for 2 years back to back. So welcome to Ed Junkins to the Foundation Board of Trustees. All right, that's all what we have. Any other reports? See none. Next up is the superintendent's report.
Did you go ahead and do it?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Sammy.
You're welcome.
So I have a lot of content to share tonight. And so oftentimes I sort of just have my report, but I speak from it. But tonight there's enough information in here that I think is important that I need to read from it. So I'll do more reading than I will just sharing comments. So there are a number of topics to talk about related to the end of the school year, and also all those things that have been going on across our country. So there's a lot to cover. And so I wanted to share a little bit of information with you on a number of topics. So the first one is that our school district has been part of a regional racial equity group. A little over a year ago, we started to focus on, we had a conversation with the NAACP, Corvallis and Albany chapter. And out of that conversation came a desire to meet with districts across our region and talk about what districts across our region are doing regarding racial equity work. When we first met, we talked about the fact that the NAACP region included Corvallis, it included Albany, it included Lebanon, it included Philomath. And for our school districts to come together and start to have conversations was something that needed to happen. And so about a little bit over a year ago, we started meeting, and we've met a couple times each year, 3 times each year, bringing together superintendents, principals, teachers to talk about the work happening across districts so that we're aligned and sharing our learning and also working to support all of our students. So recently we worked to develop a statement that will be shared in the coming days. Not tonight because we're having all of the superintendents sign off on it as well as the NAACP, and we'll be sharing that that proclamation across our region. But I wanted you to be aware of that because you will see that on social media and in other formats and forums. So I wanted you to know that that was the work that led to that proclamation. But in essence, this is what it says. The mission of our group is to confront, interrupt, and dismantle systems of inequity that persist for our students, staff, and families of color. We have been working on a declaration that will be shared soon, and we hope will empower and encourage our students, staff, and communities of color that we are all in this together. We'll hold ourselves accountable to eliminate racial disparities, inequities in our system. Again, while this statement has been in process since earlier this spring, the facts of our current racial climate and trauma for our communities of color are a reminder of the critical importance and urgency of our work. Again, having each one of our superintendents sign off on it and speak to this across our region highlights the importance of the work across each one of our school districts. And again, also identifies how we're working as a community to address racial disparities that we have seen historically in our schools. So I'm excited about that proclamation coming forward. And more than anything, I just wanted you to know and to be looking for that in the next couple of days. Another topic that I've been focusing on over the last couple of weeks has been conversations about school resource officers. Over the last several weeks, concerns from the community have been raised about the role of police officers in our schools. We currently have a school resource officer from the Corvallis Police Department assigned to our district and funded through the City of Corvallis Police and Fire Public Safety fee. So it's not dollars that we're spending directly, it's through the fee that we pay towards police and fire. Over the last 2 weeks, I've had discussions with the president of the NAACP, Corvallis Albany branch, and the incoming and outgoing Corvallis Police Department police chiefs. I've also received emails from high school students and families requesting that our district no longer have an SRO in our schools. I recognize the need for the school board to understand the current role of our SRO in ongoing dialogue with our community before we consider potential changes for the future. And so I just wanted you more than anything just to know that conversations are happening where I am able to have conversations with community groups as well as our police chiefs to talk about what that SRO position looks like, what are considerations, what are suggestions and ideas. And I also welcome feedback from our community as we continue to have conversations about school resource officers. So that's something that's ongoing. Another significant area is planning for the 2021 school year. So again, this is one that I'll probably read to because there's a lot of information in it. Yesterday, the directors of the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority released the Ready Schools Safe Learners Guidance for the 2021 school year, with the expectation that schools across the state of Oregon will reopen for instruction either in person, online, or a combination of the two, or a hybrid approach. This guidance includes significant health and safety protocol requirements, including physical distancing practices of 35 square feet per student in classrooms, creating student cohorts that to allow for contact tracing, transportation with 3 feet between students on buses, and meal service and other student supports. These safety requirements set the stage for a likely return through a hybrid learning model. Also in the guidance are the following reminders. Our state will be living with the virus until there is immunity, which is many months off. The best tool to protect individuals are physical distancing and hygiene. Every health restriction lifted increases the opportunity for transmission and will increase cases. Every decision has the potential to disproportionately impact the most marginalized and historically underserved communities by exacerbating existing conditions of inequity. As we work through the challenges of COVID-19, I have to remind myself of the quote by Dr. Anthony Fauci, "You don't make the timelines, the virus makes the timelines." With that in mind, we're also developing a more comprehensive distance learning model. It is our hope not to shift to a comprehensive distance learning approach next school year, yet in cases of COVID-19 increase cohorts, schools, or the district may be required to make this shift following guidance from the Oregon Health Authority. We recognize the challenges any educational delivery model poses for our families and that our communities of color are impacted to a greater extent. Concerns including supporting at-home learning and social and emotional needs of our students, parent and guardian work schedule requirements, and the needs of our students to have an in-person connection with school staff and friends are weighing heavily on our minds as we create a plan for next year. While we anticipate continued guidance over the coming weeks and months, these guidelines provide us the framework necessary as we continue our 2021 reopening plans and activities. In addition to the parent and staff input already received, we currently have teams of educators participating in 7 planning teams. Their continued work will inform our district's plan that must be approved by the school board and submitted to ODE by August 15th. There are many questions left to be answered surrounding summer activities, fall athletics, and individualized circumstances for students and staff. I'm looking forward to sharing a plan that will allow us to safely welcome back our students and staff in September. Guidance from the Oregon Department of Education will be updated throughout the summer, and we will continue to partner closely with local health experts and engage stakeholders and communicate as we work together to develop plans to keep our students and staff safe. So again, a significant information was shared by the Department of Ed and OHA, Oregon Health Authority, and we're continuing to work on our plan and realize those requirements around social distancing, cohorting, transportation, make it difficult for us to consider a reopening that would include all students on the first day of school. However, our goal is to have as much student to teacher face-to-face contact as possible, and we're working hard to see how best to do that as we continue to plan for the fall. We'll be providing more information to families and then in the coming days, obviously before folks leave for summer vacation, which was not really leaving for anywhere other than staying home. But as we close the school year out, those are the kinds of things we're thinking about right now, and communicating with our families is really important. Also, some supports that will continue through the summer I want to highlight and share with you, because again, these are highlights of supports that can be shared with our community. Free meals for children will continue to be offered at curbside pickup locations throughout the summer. The current sites are at Lincoln and Wilson Elementary Schools, Linus Pauling Middle School, Clemens Primary School in Philomath, Witham Hill, located at the city bus stop at the top of Witham Hill, and Adair Village at Santiam Christian School. All sites are approved for the summer meals program and will continue through August 28th. Thanks again to the Food and Nutrition Service Manager, Sharon Gibson, for her leadership and continuing to serve and feed our students. The care and support for our most vulnerable families continues to be a priority. Donated food and supply pantry bags are being delivered to families in need, and this will continue through the summer months. Donations continue to be accepted at Western View Center Monday through Thursday from 9 to noon. Starting June 22nd, donation hours will be Tuesday and Thursday only from 9 to noon. We're also grateful to our community donors and partners for supporting our families with their donations, and to the Pacific Coast Fruit Company for their generous donation of 60 cases of food and produce each week that is shared between Corvallis, Philomath, and the LC area. So again, community continues to step up and help us to take care of our families. Also a recognition of the foundation and their continued support as we talk about how do we maintain care and connection, how do we maintain services to families throughout the summer. This foundation has been continuing to ask, how can we help you to support our families? And that relationship and that support has been really vital. I am always impressed by the work of our foundation, but this is so distinct, clear, and ongoing care and support that I know without their support, we would not be able to support the families like we have been able to. And so a huge recognition of the foundation and their work. It's been really phenomenal. Also around Wi-Fi and access over the summer. To support the opportunity for summer learning, student devices will not be turned in over the summer. Middle school students moving up to high school will be turning in their iPads and will be receiving a Chromebook. That will be taking place next week. Internet access for students will continue to be offered this summer at Linus Pauling Middle School, Lincoln Elementary School, Mountain View, Adams, and between the district office and Adams. Student devices will automatically log in through the district filter at those locations from those parking lots, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. And families are reminded that they, if they come to the area by car, please maintain social distancing. And the areas will be monitored, but no supervision will be provided. Finally, I just want to take a minute to recognize Julie Catala. As many of you know, as all of you know, this is Julie's final board meeting with us after being here for the last 20 years. Look at that. Vince was ready. Congratulations, Julie popped up.
Oh, I was looking for the sad face, but we don't appear to have one of those.
So Julie has been the board secretary for the last 20 years, having worked with 4 superintendents during that time, countless board members, and has really served our family, our community. She's often the voice that you get when you call the district office and the superintendent's office, and she responds with care, with dignity and respect, and makes families and community feel cared for. One of the stories in my short time here was when Ed Junkins was looking for a place where he could become involved. And he reached out to a number of groups, and he reached out and talked to Julie. And after talking to Julie, he knew that this was a place where he could be involved and support community. And it was because of that conversation he had with her that he saw this as that place for him. So I know that he's not alone in that story and what Julie's done to support all of us in our work. As my first superintendency, working alongside Julie has given me so much perspective and support that I can't imagine the successes I've had without her support along the way. So I know we're all across the community, but I think a round of applause is more than appropriate for Julie. also, just so you know, we will have a drive-through retirement. I would call it a gala, but it's drive-through, so it's not quite a gala. But we will have a drive-through opportunity to come and say goodbye to Julie on the 17th from 3 to 5. Julie and Cindy Dadges, who works here at the district office, that is our opportunity to thank both of them for their work, and Julie for the last 20 years here with CSD. So that concludes my superintendent's report.
All right. On a positive note, I want to say thank you again for Julie. I feel really fortunate. The public service that I've been able to provide to the community, I would attribute it to Julie. She taught me how to do things better every single time. When I do things not so good, I learn my lesson, and we document the lesson for others to learn from, including myself in the future. So Julie, thank you for your leadership. One thing you taught me, never speak on behalf of others, never speak on behalf of the board unless there's an action. I'm going to defy that strong recommendation to say every single board member, board chair, for the years and years who served before us are very grateful to you and to your service and to your support for the kids. So many families in their most challenging times, when they reach out to you with the most frustrations that they feel through, they find the calming voice and reassuring voice that they will find a place where they will be treated equally and fairly, and that their kids are going to be cared for. So Julie, thank you so much for everything you've done. Thank you.
It's my honor.
Thank you. On that note, I want to leave it for everyone. If you have anything you want to say or comments, whether on this positive note or anything else on Superintendent Na's reports. All right, let's go with the raise of virtual hands, but first I'll go with Vince since I saw the physical hand.
Sorry. I just want to say thank you to Julie and the wonderful service that you've given. I can't imagine being on the school board or having been on the school board without your tutelage. And it's now the lessons that I've learned from Julie and her prowess, the skill and the grace and the integrity that she brings to her position. I get to work at the Oregon School Boards Association, taking those lessons to increase the effectiveness of boards, to improve the outcomes for children all across Oregon. So I just feel humble and thankful for Julie and the great work that she's done with the Corvallis School Board.
Thank you, Vince. Appreciate it. Therese?
Oh, okay. I am unmuted. Okay. There were a few things about the superintendent's report that I think are noteworthy, but I'm going to leave the others for future comments or conversation, and say just instead that I'm nervous about being in this role without Julie here. I'm worried because I'm not going to remember my password, and there isn't going to be anyone to help me figure out how to get in after I've locked myself out again, or reset my iPad again. Or find the login information for the meeting one more time. And so I'm not organized without her there. I'm barely organized with her there. And so I'm nervous for myself without her there. But also I want to say that what's hard about this meeting is that we don't get to be there in person. But what's amazing about Julie is that we're not even in the same room, and I still feel her warmth from the service that she's providing all the way on the other side of Corvallis, and the care that she's bringing to the work that she's doing. And so I don't know the board without you. I don't know the school district without you as part of that. So this will be a new experience. But I'm really happy for you that you get to go on to other things. After having given so much of yourself to this space. It goes without saying that it won't be the same without you. What I really mean to say is that I am not going to be the same if you are not going to be in the boardroom every week when we come and gather. So I will really miss you.
Thank you, Therese. I want to take this moment also to acknowledge one of the amazing accomplishments of Julie, training Lindsay Kang, who's our new superintendent and board assistant. And she's been doing wonderful work, and seeing how Julie is effective in delegating the work to Lindsay in the past few weeks up close, being the board chair. I just want to say welcome aboard, Lindsay, and Julie, good job. I would not feel confident to delegate the way that you delegated, but that's a testimony on how skillful you are and efficient you are, and amazing Lindsay is as well. So thank you both for really making this transition very smooth, and hopefully the board will see that as well. Lou, you're up next.
Like Teresa, I have some questions about the superintendent report, but I wanted to come back to that and just thank Julie for helping bring me on like in the middle of the year, and really made this a lot easier for me to understand what to do, like gave me so many tips, and I just really thank you for that. And I know we've only worked for a shorter time than anybody else probably, but I really appreciate you. And also, like Teresa, like how many times I've forgotten my password, and I also forgot it again. So gonna have to get it reset again. But I really appreciate all your support. And a lot of people don't realize how much behind the scenes work goes on to make anything possible, and including school board work. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Lou. Up next, Jay.
I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank Ryan for the report, but mostly it's about what it represents as a huge challenge that involves caring for all kids around the issues of equity and school resource officers and fall start. And I just appreciate the tone and the energy that you're having to put together in your leadership. So thank you. And no answers right now, but thank you for your hard work. As for Julie, again, because I'm a little bit more senior than some of you, I happen to know that Julie is a public servant beyond the school district. She worked before in a capacity at the Corvallis Public Police, and I knew her there, and I just am very grateful to have known her in this capacity at the school district. I describe her as both positive and professional, and having a caring and quiet passion for good schools and good districts. So Julie, I just wish you all the best. Congratulations on a great job with us, and have a great next step.
Up next is Sarah.
I also want to thank Julie for supporting us, the school board for 20 years, and the superintendent, but specifically us in the 3 years I've been on the board. It's because of Julie listening to me just dump everything I was thinking on her on a couple of occasions that I could then come to a meeting and seem like a reasonable person. So I really appreciate that she could she could play that role for me. And just the amount of trust that I have in her to be able to keep us on the path, doing things the way we're supposed to be doing things, and the institutional knowledge that has brought. As there's been a lot of turnover in the board over the last couple of years, has been immensely valuable and helpful, and allowed us to be work together as a board rather than questioning things that were going on. I do want to welcome Lindsay. It feels a little funny for Julie to be leaving when none of us have really met Lindsay. So it really feels like Julie's disappearing and there's this gaping hole, but I want to acknowledge that we have Lindsay who will be taking care of us. She may not realize all the things she's going to have to do for us that we're now bringing up. So welcome, Lindsay, and I hope that, and I trust that you will be able to, in your own way, provide us with the support we need to do our jobs.
Thank you. Up next is Tina.
I do have some comments for Ryan later on, but for now I just wanted to say that I'm new this year and I was facing a sink or swim scenario, and Julie taught me how to swim and keep doing it. And even when I felt that I just couldn't do it anymore, she just kept the encouragement and like, you could do this. And when I forgot my password or forgot this, what was going to go next, she just laid it out quietly. So I didn't feel so embarrassed being new and not knowing all the steps and what. and I just, not only just the school board stuff, but the outside compassion and encouragement that Julie has for each of us as individuals. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And this is kind of like sad moment, but then, I know she's moving on to things, a new journey, new path, exciting. And I also wanted to acknowledge, our new superintendent assistant, Lindsay, and I'm looking forward to, getting to know you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And again, congratulations, Julie, on the retirement. And thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. And thank you for the foundation for recognizing Julie on the Stellar Award for the this year for the Golden Apple. It's an award that's not given every year. It's for those who are exceptional. And Julie, you're definitely exceptional. Thank you. All right, any other comments on the superintendent's report? And I'll see the hands in the order that they were raised. First up is Vince.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Jay's appreciation for Ryan, the work that you and your staff are doing right now. I know that you're running with the throttle wide open, maybe even 110%. My question is, what can the board and the public expect around communication? There's going to be a lot of things coming up as your teams solidify the plan for this fall. And I know there are a lot of parents out there that have a lot of questions. And so what can we expect for communications, both for the public and for the board, is where we need to engage with this work?
So one of the things I'd say is that we started that engagement already by asking through a survey of parents to give us a better sense about their concerns about having their students come back to school, as well as understanding what those educational models could look like for the fall and giving us input on those. And so that has been really helpful to us as we've had conversations internally. Our distance learning, or our educational delivery group is made up of they meet with a group of about 70 teachers right now as they have conversations. They also have a small group that meets in between to prep, but they're looking for input from staff. And at the same time, the input that's coming from our parents has been really valuable as we talk about what school should look like in the fall, understanding the safety aspect of that too. So our goal is to have additional information out to parents by the end of next week at the latest, understanding that we have plenty of work to do between now and then based on the guidance. But then there will be ongoing communication through the summer. We anticipate at least 3 more, not necessarily new guidance, but additional guidance, enhanced or augmented guidance 3 times through the summer. By I think August 10th is the 3rd time that we should receive guidance. Along the way, we'll be using that information to revise and refine our plans. So communication will be coming from the district along the way throughout the summer. We'll also be coming from schools throughout the summer. This summer will look different for our building leaders than it has in the past. We've already talked about schedules and having them available in July as new information comes out. We'll have new information about budget after a legislative short session. We'll have additional information about guidance around safety and health, and around educational delivery. So it's a summer that a lot of work's going to continue to happen, and we'll be continuing to share that information with parents. Our elementary principals were talking today about what's another way that we continue to get information from families related to our individual schools and work that's happening there. And so I also would say that communication will be happening in terms of input at both the school and district level. So we anticipate it being a busy summer where we will continue to provide information. We've had the same sorts of conversation with our teachers and our classified staff about sending out notifications. And I've been doing live chats with staff, and I'll continue to do those during the summer as well. The last one, I think we had over 300 staff members who participated. And it's just it brings us together, but it's also a time for us to for me to answer questions that people bring up in the chat, because we want the most current information to be out. And oftentimes there's information that we shared that's relevant for everyone, but other people have specific questions that they need help with and support with. And so we've worked to try to do that as well. Jennifer Duvall has had open times for staff members to come and reach out to her about their positions and questions they may have about personnel matters. So we're trying to make sure that those channels stay open. That was a long answer to your question, Vince, but I see that there's a lot of different entry points as we continue to work through this.
No, that was exactly what I was looking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Vince. Next up is Lou and then Sarah.
Hi, Ryan. I just had a couple questions and comments. One of them is with about the statement that the district sent out that offered support for families and students, particularly Black students and families. I really appreciated that there was resources listed on there. If people needed to seek those resources out, a lot of statements are missing those types of pieces, and so I just want to say I appreciated it being in there. And as statements are released, the thing that's missing out of a lot of them is actually like action. And so like a lot of words are being offered, like we support communities, especially Black communities right now, community members. And so like, as future statements are released, I encourage you to continue to add things in, like how you had something that actually had some actionable items in it. As a way to show the support instead of just say it. And so thank you for doing that. I did want to mention that when we're listing out names of people that have been impacted, especially by police violence with the Black Lives Matter movement, that there's been this huge erasure of Tony McDade, who's a Black trans man. And that was also missing from the statement. So I think we need to be careful about, especially the erasure of trans violence against people as a result of the police. And in this case, it was a Black trans man. And that's been part of a lot of the awareness that's being brought up with the marches too, is how there is that erasure happening, and that death happened around the same time frame. And so I just wanted to kind of offer that too as well, to like think about how we cannot participate in that erasure. And that was just a comment on that, but I do appreciate how that letter was framed, and the one that you all are releasing too. I did have a question about the school resource officers. You probably imagined that already, but about the conversations, are like, who is involved with that? Is that community? Is it only students? How many schools are involved with that conversation? Are any parents involved? So those are kind of my questions about that first. And I have another question about the school resource officers, but I'll pause for a second with that one.
So I would say that there are multiple spots where conversations are happening. I know that there are students specifically at CHS who've reached out through email and have talked about meeting with Principal Boring. And I know that in conversations with Matt, there was another meeting that he was anticipating having, that including students and the school resource officer. So that was one piece. The conversations in my superintendent's report are conversations that I'm having directly. So the conversations that I've had with Angel from the NAACP and with the incoming and outgoing police chiefs, those were conversations that I've had directly. And then in terms of the input, the public input, I've seen that coming through primarily through email. And I think those have been often or most often directed to the board rather than individually to the superintendent. And so, so I would say that, again, there are a number of different places right now where conversations are taking place. And I do think that it will be valuable as we move forward to bring forward some of that information to the board. I think you'll probably have public testimony from students today about that. But I also think it's important that the board has a chance to sort of understand the role and sort of over time, and also have conversations about, are there aspects to the position and role that are important? Are there things that we should consider changing? And so I see that as a ongoing conversation. I know that that for a number of communities and school districts, those conversations take some time and take some intention. And I think that that's at this point how I see us moving forward. Again, I'm always, at the direction of the board, but I do see the value in having that opportunity for us to work together and get more information as we decide how to move forward.
Sammy, are we talking about this later at all? Or if I have questions specifically about the school resource officer role, should I ask it now?
I think it's okay. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, I just want to make sure like this was the right space to ask it. So thank you. So there's not really any information anywhere about the impact of having school resource officers.
Say that again.
Could you repeat that one more time, Lou, if you can stop?
Yeah. I can't find any information anywhere since we started receiving letters, and other districts have been taking action nationwide and in Oregon. I was kind of looking into the role they play a little bit more deeply, and there's not really any information available about exactly what they do, but also more importantly, that if there's been any positive impact of having that position. And so what has been the positive impact is nowhere. And there's nothing that's public facing anyways. And there's nothing that lists what school resource officers, if there's any other kind of psychological impact of having them in the schools on students, particularly students that come from communities that have either received violence in other places or here in town. We're not immune to that at all. That does happen. There are certain populations that are targeted more than others here in Corvallis, and there's nothing that shows like the psychological impact of having them in our district schools, or on even the parents dropping them off. And so to me, that's kind of concerning, that if there's an investment from the city to support this position being in the schools, the purpose isn't very well laid out, other than like creating more positive interactions with law enforcement and learning about local laws. And what outweighs the other is my question. And so I don't know if you know where that can be found, or if there's any reports like that exist that show the impact, but I couldn't find any.
If I might say something, we have a MOU with the city of Corvallis for the SRO. And in that MOU, there are some items that are called out as far as what the duties of the SRO are. And that's something that I can share with Ryan so he can share with the board.
I think right now that that kind of information should be accessible anyways to people, but especially right now. And so that would be helpful if it wasn't just the board that received that. Like, as a public entity, it doesn't seem like that should be like, if public has interest in school resource officers, they should be able to access that information. And so I was looking at it from like public facing everything and can't find anything. So thank you for letting me know that there's the MOU, but again, I couldn't find any reports, and they've been around for a little while, so there should be some kind of data on this, but it doesn't seem like, it seems like it's based on assumptions at this point is what I'm saying about the positive impact. And thank you.
Thank you. And I will make sure that we get that MOU information out. And then if there's other additional information that we can share, I'll work on that.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Lou, for the questions. Do you have any follow-up questions, Lou?
No, that's it for right now.
Good. Next up is Vince.
I just wanted to follow up on that and just say that in the time that I've been on the board, there's been a few times when the board has received reports on the school resource officer program. I recall a report from the previous school resource officer in collaboration with counseling staff where they talked about the program. That was Karen Stouter. And then since I recall, I think 2 times we've seen Evan Hull in the boardroom giving a report on the work that he does in our schools. And I would say, I mean, from my point of view, it's all been positive, but there of course are unknowns and subjective experience of having an armed officer in schools that I don't think we have information on that, or we haven't seen that information.
Thanks, Vince. Up next is Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. I had taken my hand down because Lou covered what I was going to ask, but then Vince, your point, I think what we may be needing right now is not a report about the SRO from the SRO, but information about how having the SRO in the school and the different roles he plays impacts our families and students, because that's a different thing. So I think we need to, when we think about reports from the SRO or about the SRO, let's expand outside of just hearing from him.
I agree.
So as you are sharing this information with me, because we're in this format, you can't see what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I'm taking down notes to get a sense of what information to bring back to the board. So as you are sharing your ideas and thoughts on this, that's what I'm working to put together.
Thanks, Ryan. Up next, I think was Jay and then Therese.
Just thank you for the chance to comment a little bit. I have a perspective because when I was principal at Corvallis High, we gained an SRO program and Karen was our SRO. And as a principal leader, I would want Ryan to go visit with principals and ask what's the impact that they see. On the other hand, I absolutely appreciate the student input that we've had this last 2 weeks, and we need to be sure we have the pulse of how are they perceiving it. I believe there may be some students who see it as a very strong, positive, reassuring presence, but not everybody. And so I appreciate more input. Also, the memorandum of understanding is a common tool used to document the use of SROs, not as a school discipline tool, but as a representative of law enforcement. So I really appreciated the role that they were not there to chase kids out of the hallway when they should be in their classroom. That's not their job, but what is their job? And so I'm looking forward to hearing how that program works well. Thank you.
Thanks. Up next, Therese. And if there is anyone else after Therese, probably I'll give it 5 more minutes and then maybe we need to move on. But this is very important discussion, so I want to give it as much time as we want. So let's say 5 to 10 minutes max before we move on to the next topic. Therese?
Thanks, Sammy. So many of the things that I noted have been addressed by others, so I will not repeat those. with regard to the plan for the fall, which I realize is challenging to derive as we continue to see the situation evolve and the expectations and the needs change. My question is what, I have two questions. The first question is, when we reach a point where we have the known variables that we need to take into account for making a plan for the fall, and decisions need to be made in order to figure out how to account for those variables, do we have a plan for involving community members and parents where there are opportunities for decisions? Some of these things, of course, there will be no decision per se, just simply how are we going to roll it out. But in the event that we do end up with a situation where maybe we are talking about needing to do a hybrid approach to education or such, do we have a plan for how we're going to reach families, and in particular, not the families that always know how to reach us anyway, but those families whose voices we might be missing because they don't necessarily know how to reach us, or reaching us isn't really able to be their priority. How are we going to make sure that we capture their perspective as well? That's my first question. I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask my second or respond to that.
So I think one of the challenges we face right now is that there is a expectation that we provide answers as soon as possible, and at the same time have an engaged community. And so we're trying to figure out that balance, to be honest with you. We obviously want and always encourage engagement, and at the same time people are asking fairly consistently now, I wouldn't say constantly, but fairly consistency now, what does the fall look like? And so we're trying to balance those two things. Again, with the conversation we had with elementary today, with Amy, the coordinator, was that, we've asked families to take on so much over the last 3 months. And so we need to hear from them. And at the same time, we need to get decisions out to them. And so I think it will be probably look more like, here's what we're thinking, provide us input on that or feedback on it, rather than having a blank slate, especially knowing the parameters and criteria that we have in place right now. 35 square feet per student in a classroom. When we know the sizes of our classrooms and how many students can fit there, some of those pieces are just fairly black and white. It's just, there's limitations that way. So that might not be the way to focus the question, but more about, if we cannot have every student every day, what kinds of schedules make the most sense for families? I think that those are areas where we can definitely get additional feedback.
That's definitely part of what I was hoping to hear from you, that you have that you, as a superintendent, that you will make the decisions where a decision needs to be made, and open up for conversation where there's legitimate opportunity and value, not just an opportunity for people to make comments, but value in getting that information, such that information that folks might provide actually could have a way out on what you end up doing. And so I appreciate that designation of, people can share all kinds of things with us, but there may just frankly be some points on which public input is not how you're going to need to make a decision about what to do. The second piece of that was about engaging families that might be harder to reach through the ways that we have traditionally reached families, sending out surveys or making phone calls. I'm concerned that we may miss their voices. And I guess, so it's not really a question so much as I just want to put out there a request for us to be particularly mindful that we find a way to hear from those families, that we find a way to make sure that they are welcome and feel welcome. And because I'm concerned, if we plan and their voices aren't, captured, that the plan we make isn't going to work for their families. So yeah, just to whatever extent you have the ability, be mindful in thinking about how to reach those families. And then my second question has to do with the resource officer Most everybody covered the broad strokes of my questions. And so I'm just going to make a specific request. I would really like to hear, not from the resource officer themselves, because we have had that opportunity, but I would like to hear more of the youth perspective. And so I'm wondering if any of our surveys that we have administered to youth have included any information about the presence of law enforcement. Do we have that? Is that data anywhere? I don't remember those questions, but that doesn't, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I read question by question. So I'm wondering if that information is there, if that is something that we can collect, if we're going to have an ongoing relationship with the police department. Well, however we're going to have that ongoing relationship, is there some way that we can make sure that we are regularly capturing the opportunity for youth to to share? Because I think I've heard the positives. What I have maybe heard less of are the stories that aren't as positive, and the stories in which the experience of the resource officer might run counter to the experience that families have with other law enforcement in our community. And so I just want to make sure also that we don't narrow the conversation about law enforcement to just the resource officer in terms of what law enforcement means or the impact that they can have on our families. That's not really a question. I think it's more of just a general comment about the things that I have heard, except for have we ever asked the kids, and can we if we haven't? That's it. I'm done now.
So I'm going to go back to your first question first, around engaging families. And so one of the things that, remembering that we have those rapid development teams, one of those teams is focused specifically on equity. And so in that team, there is student and parent voice. And then within each of those teams that, so they've been working to develop information and guidance related to what the lessons need to look like as we continue to work towards having more robust lessons, making that transition to Canvas and moving lessons to a format that we can shift to distance learning if we had to. So there's been conversation really about teaching and learning amongst that group, more so than there has been about operations to my knowledge. However, that doesn't mean that's not an important thing for them to provide feedback on. So that's kind of back to the first question. And then the second question, our Youth Truth Survey does not have a question related to having an SRO in school. There has been conversations that I've sort of followed the thread on over the last couple of days, actually last couple of weeks, about a student survey related to the role of the SRO. But up to this point, we haven't had a specific survey or survey question within a broader survey specific to that, to my knowledge. At the same time, our SRO works primarily with our assistant superintendent's office. And so there's the possibility that that's happened, but to my knowledge, that hasn't been the case.
Thank you. And next up is Tina, then Lou.
I guess I just wanted to take a moment to address my concern that we're putting too much emphasis on the voice of our administrator and administration for the impact on having the SRO in the schools, when the impact is actually on the children and families. And are we listening to where it's most important? Our voices from our families and our children who are being impacted. And are we looking at what it's like for these families, for some of them, for our families of color who have generational internalized racism and oppression? Are we looking at that? Are we listening to the voices? And I just want to voice my concern that that it's super important that we listen to our families and our children over administration and our SRO on how this is impacting and what it's like for our families and children in our school district and our schools who have to have some type of relationship with our SRO. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Tina.
Okay, it's just a really quick comment, and I think we needed to remember that the letters that are coming in from community is actually asking us to remove the SROs, and right now it feels like we're like, how this relationship will look like going forward, and I think that's an important reminder that that request has actually been made, and if a couple of people have, or a few people have spoke up, I'm sure that that is alert. There's more people than that just that have sent the letter in. And so I just want to make sure that we were clear that that is the ask. It's not the ask of like, how can we make the SROs better? The ask that has been coming forward has been, we want them removed. And I just wanted to remind us of that. That was all.
So thank you very much, Lou. I really appreciate everyone's input here. Is there anything else on the superintendent's report? Any update, any questions or comments? Well, I really appreciate it. And definitely we need to continue the conversation, be more focused on the lived experience of our students and families. So I really appreciate that our board members are bringing this up, and also our superintendent is taking the lead on that. I'm really looking forward to hear more about this in the coming months. Thank you. So now I want to move ahead to the next point on the agenda. And just to clarify the agenda for those who are listening, we do have a public hearing about the budget. Then we will vote about the budget. And then we will have public comments open to any subject other than the budget. Or you could still talk about the budget. But the first opportunity that I'm going to open right now is specific to the 2020-21 budget. So the public hearing for testimony on the 2020-2021 budget is now open. Hearing no comments, the public hearing is now closed. So we did not have anyone sign up for testimony for the budget. For those who are signed up for the public comments, stay tuned with us for few more minutes and we'll be listening, looking forward to listen to you soon. Now, the next point on the agenda is motions to revise 2020-21 budget. Does anyone wish to revise the approved 2020-2021 budget? And if so, please, there's a motion sheet in your email. Write out your motion in its entirety before reading it out. And I will restate your motion before we cast our votes. Otherwise, you can state your motion, whether it is a revision or an approval. Any motions or comments or questions? Vince.
I would just like to express my appreciation to the superintendent and the finance officer and her department in the work advising the board and keeping us apprised of the fiscal situation that's unfolding right now. You know, I really appreciated the work that went into the budget committee process and the transparency that staff brought into that process. And I'm excited to approve the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. Any other comments? I want to ask Julie, since it's been a motion from the committee, does it need a motion or is it on the table without a motion?
When you say the committee,
From the citizen committee?
no, it needs a board member, vote.
We need a
So
board
the
action.
budget is adopted by the board.
So we need
It's
a board
approved
action.
By the budget committee, but
Okay, okay. So we need to hear a motion from someone.
And there's a packet.
And-
And motion in the packet.
And there's a motion in your packet that you can refer to. I saw Sarah's hand first, so let's go with Sarah.
I move that resolution number 200601 be adopted to adopt the budget, make appropriations, impose property taxes, and categorize taxes for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Do I hear a second? Vince, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I will happily second that motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the budget? I have two things to mention. We're putting critical and essential investments into this budget. That's our deeply needed for our community. And I really appreciate the work of our superintendents and staff developing a budget that speaks to the needs of our community. And we have programs and initiatives that are systemic changes that addresses equity, health and wellness, and students' achievements. So I really want to thank our superintendent and the finance team led by Olivia for the diligent work and answering our questions during the citizen committee meetings. So really, thank you very much for your work. I want to tell our audience and voters, thank you for trusting us on the stewardship on your taxpayer money. And this is a very good use of the taxpayer money, in my view. We want to make sure we advocate for full funding for this budget through reaching out to our state legislators. So reach out to your state representatives and senators to advocate for full funding for this. It's very important to navigate through the pandemic and through many challenges our students and their families navigate through. And to support them, we can't do that without a full funding for this budget to support our teachers and educators and everyone who take care of our kids and their families. So thank you for doing this really amazing and really diligent work. I appreciate it. With that, is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I think I have to restate the motion. It's been moved that resolution number 20-0601 be adopted to adopt the budget, make appropriation, impose property tax, and categorize taxes for the 2020-21 fiscal year by the Vice Chair Finger McDonald and seconded by Director Adams. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 I forgot to unmute it. Aye.
Okay, I've been advised by the secretary to take a roll call vote. So let's do that. Vince,
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Luke,
Aye.
Grace,
Aye.
Sarah. And myself, I vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. We have a budget. Great. Thank you. All right, now next up is we do have a budget, but we need to appropriate taxes. We already did that in the same motion, correct? Okay, so that's both are.
I'm on public comment, and then she can tell you who she's gonna hit.
Wonderful. So next up is the public and staff comments. So we do have several folks who are registered to testify. Shall we let them in and then I read the,
You're gonna do it for each one.
For each
We're
one?
not gonna let them all in at once. Just the two that are going to testify.
Okay.
First, and then each one will testify together.
sounds good,
So unfortunately, we have to read this to every person.
wonderful. All right, so our
So
first,
Molly and Aiden, and just ask them to identify themselves.
all right, so our first testimony or public comment comes from two of our students, Molly and Aiden. Molly and Aiden, welcome. I would like you to identify yourself to the school board. And then after you identify yourselves, I'm going to let you know some of the requirements of the testimony, and then I'll give you the time to testify. So could you identify yourselves, Molly and Aiden? So mention your name, say your name.
Let's unmute them. I think
Oh, yeah.
let's see, where are they? 67408.
Hi, my name is Molly Gottfried. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be a senior at Corvallis High School this coming year.
Wonderful. Welcome, Molly.
And I'm Aiden Evans. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll also be a senior at CHS this year.
Welcome, Aiden. Thank you for coming and for being willing to testify, to provide your public comments. I will read to you a script that defines the boundaries of for each person who testifies. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. Complaints shall be handled in accordance with board policy KL, which is available online. The board chair has the right to terminate a speaker's privilege of address if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. I will alert you when you have 30 seconds left with when your time is up. Probably I'll have some kind of something like this if you can hear that. Can you hear that, Nut?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'll do a small tap so I don't disrupt your speech. And following your comments, the board will have 3 minutes to ask clarifying questions. So for this time, since you are two individuals, I'll provide you of total 6 minutes, and you can use it as you wish. But if you can be as brief as possible or not repeat each other, that would be good. So feel free to start at any time.
So we are calling in to bring up our concerns and frustrations with allowing a police presence in our schools.
We urge you to no longer allow school resource officers on our campuses, to stop any school funding from being sent to the police, and instead work to hire more counselors or people not related and affiliated with the police department who will address the root of any potential problems.
We had a meeting with our principal and some members of the city council the other week, and were met with a lack of agreement in this matter. We feel that the conversation ended before it even really began.
For the safety and well-being of our minority students, Black students in particular, if the Corvallis School District truly is a safe, inclusive community, we must take the steps to create that space for everyone.
Violence can't be the answer, and we need to have protocol in place to de-escalate before violence and potential trauma is introduced.
After our last meeting, I reached out to the Corvallis Albany chapter of the NAACP to ask for support in these efforts. Their executive team spoke quickly about our ask and have agreed to stand with us and offer their support.
The support from people living in Corvallis and across the United States is abundantly clear, with over 4,000 people in Corvallis attending marches and protests in the middle of a global pandemic.
We have people around us who believe in what we are doing and know that it is the right thing to do, and this conversation will not be forgotten or slowed down.
Thank you for listening to us today, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and making the transition together to safer schools for everyone.
Thank you, Aiden and Molly. Do you have any further comments?
Well, I'd also like to say that this measure has been taken not only in the Minneapolis School District, but also the Portland School District. Seeing the amount of police brutality that is currently present in the United States, we truly do feel that this is important, and it's clear that other places are taking these steps, and we hope that Corvallis also does.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's not just this thing that is occurring in cities that we've never been to, that we don't live in states that we don't live in, the fact that things are changing in Oregon and near our homes really is a testament to where this world is heading and what changes really do need to be made in our school district and in our city.
And then also we had said that we'd rather have this funding go towards counselors, and we'd love to explore more policy options, just making sure that there are steps in place to make sure that safety of students is ensured. But right now, the police department does not ensure that safety.
And there are a lot of different policy recommendations, and you can look at dignityinschools.org and search for counselors, not cops, and they have a lot of different recommendations. So there's a lot of research about this and information out there.
Thank you. So I really want to start by thanking you for bringing your voice up. And I had the privilege to attend the protest that you mentioned and listen. It's a very important time for us to listen and also to understand what action we need to make. I want to open the floor for board members who wish to ask questions, clarifying questions for you. So I'll start with Director Vince Adams and then Director Luhui White-Bear.
So Molly and Aiden, thank you for taking the initiative to come and speak to the board. This is an important issue, and the board takes the safety of students very seriously. You mentioned initiating a conversation, and I think many of the members, if not all the board members of the board, are interested in having that conversation. I'm curious what you want that conversation to look like.
Well, I think we were kind of expecting some resistance, and so we wanted to, if there were, to fully talk through all of the issues that surround having an armed police officer in schools, and basing that is just off of the meeting that we had with our principal and the city council, and then also the conversations of developing policy recommendations and what we can do after this, and using student voices in that conversation.
Thank you. Any further questions, Director Vince Adams? Next up is Director Luhui White-Bear.
Okay, I have to unmute myself. That's good. Thanks, Sammy. Molly and Aiden, I did want to thank you for coming and bringing your voices here tonight. I think that's super important that you're able to do that, as well as like send in written materials. My question for you is, are you looking for conversations or are you looking for action right now?
We are definitely looking for action. We also recognize that this is coming in the middle of a movement that is really big and where there are lots of things that need to be clarified and that people aren't agreeing with. So we wanted to make sure that there is an option to talk about it and to provide that space, but ultimately we would love to see and we need to see action being taken.
Right. Okay, so that was my question for y'all, is exactly like what you were hoping for. And you mentioned you have a lot of community behind you, so thanks for bringing their voices in with you too, and that you're not just speaking on behalf of yourself, you're speaking on behalf of a large community. Yeah, I don't have any more questions for you. I have questions about processes, but that can happen after, right, Sammy?
Mhm.
Okay, cool, thank you. And, oh wait, no, I did have one more question, I'm sorry. You said that you felt somewhat, that the conversation with the principal and, was it the county or was it the city that you had?
The city council.
The city council, that you felt like it was kind of ended before it even started? Was there something specific that made you feel like that? If you don't want to answer that, you don't have to, or if there was like, if you just didn't feel heard,
Yeah,
it was?
I think that the meeting might have been at an awkward spot where our principal had to leave early. And then we were speaking with a city councilwoman who was directly affiliated with the police department. And so the conversation wasn't able to flow as well.
Okay, so it was just you all and the council person at that point too?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Any further questions? Well, I want to sincerely thank you, Aiden and Molly. Whenever students come to our board and testify, it means a lot to me, and I'm sure to my fellow board members. It's very important to hear your voice, and our policies and decision making and even spending is informed by students. So thank you for testifying and providing your comments. I encourage you to continue the conversation with the superintendent if possible, and also with us through the medium that we just have. On me, I will take the action to really read through the resources that you referred us to, and you might hear us deliberating on some of the aspects that you mentioned during the board member comments or in a future board meeting. So stay tuned. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments and your public comments.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Like an honor. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Who's our next public comment? All right. Up next is Denise Cardinelli. All right. You've been unmuted. Could you identify yourself, please?
This is Denise Cardinelli.
Denise, welcome. And I would like to ask you to listen to some items that I want to mention before you start your public comment. Speakers.
I heard you.
You did hear them?
Yeah, I heard them when you read it to Malia and Aaron because I'm watching the board meeting live.
Wonderful. Then I'll take that. So you have 3 minutes and you can begin right now. Or
Just a second.
Take your time.
This is Denise. Okay. This is Denise Carnelli. I'm the parent of 2 CHS graduates from 15 and 17. I'm also the head coach of the CHS robotics team. For those of you who don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I'm the lead district nurse for the North Santingham School District, where I've worked for 14 years. In the 13-14 school year, I was a consultant to the Corvallis School District and helped orient and train the district nurses when Corvallis moved to hiring their own nurses. I also serve on the State School Nurse Advisory Committee, which gives me a broad perspective of school nursing and school health issues. In the budget process, I shared with you my concerns about the very concerning nurse-to-student ratio in the school district. The recommendation is 1 RN per 750. In pre-COVID, I would have said 1 to 1,000 might be manageable depending on the level of medical complexity of the students in the school. Last I calculated, Corvallis was at 1 nurse for every 1,860 students. Keep in mind, this is not 1 nurse in a very large school, but likely students in 3 or 4 schools. I think this is going to be a very important consideration as we move into the school year impacted by COVID. In the testimony, I shared with you a number of considerations. Today, I would like to share two different observations. Division 22 requires that districts maintain a prevention-oriented health service program for all students, including space to isolate sick students and serve students with special healthcare needs. As the district looks at upgrading facilities, a number of our health rooms are in those plans. I would suggest that we need to carefully consider our plans. After 14 years of school nursing, I will say the statement and the required space to isolate a student has taken on new meaning. We have a virus that is clearly contagious, unlike others that we have dealt with. In my experience, where I work and in schools I visit, very few were designed with a space to separate and isolate a sick child. In my Corvallis experience, I know of 2 schools where there are 3 cots side by side. In the district where I work, 1 of my 7 schools has a clear isolation space. So we are reevaluating space and likely moving offices to make isolation rooms. In looking at what happens in our health rooms, some of our most vulnerable population come into this space frequently for medications and to support their chronic health conditions. Think of a child with asthma who needs medication or a student with diabetes. In the same room, we often have a cot or a space for a sick child to rest until they are picked up. In other healthcare settings, such as a doctor's office, there would be a separate room and access to a hand washing sink would be readily available. As the district moves forward with building upgrades, serious consideration needs to be given to designing appropriate isolation spaces that keep everyone healthy and safe. In the short term, the districts throughout the state should be collaborating with healthcare professionals who understand school health and public health to evaluate current spaces and facilities to determine how they will provide isolation spaces. My second observation builds on the need for collaboration between education and public health. Involving nurses who understand both areas is critical. This past week, I had the opportunity to be involved in a couple of aspects of getting ready for graduation and celebrating graduation. As a healthcare professional, it was evident to me there's a great opportunity in education to understand the use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, in particular gloves. The CDC's COVID resources recommend that gloves be worn when caring for sick and cleaning and disinfecting. In other situations, the best protection is washing your hands. What I observed was likely situations where those who were wearing gloves, if infection substances were present, it would likely have been spread.
Denise, could you conclude?
I've got like 2 paragraphs. I'm almost there. There are very limited situations. What? There are very limited situations.
So if you could conclude with maybe 15-second summary of
okay.
2 paragraphs to talk about.
Okay, I'll read my last paragraph and I'll send the rest. So we really need to be looking at, for K-12 education in Oregon, we're entering very interesting times. Collaboration with nurses with expertise in public health and those who understand schools and education will be very important. Hospital nursing is a very different nursing. So thank you. Are there questions?
Yes, I would want to open the floor for board members to ask questions. My first question, please, yes, email your comments and the rest of your comments, because I would love to read.
I'll email my whole testimony.
Appreciate it. Director Vince Adams.
I wanted to say, reinforce saying, yes, please email, and particularly your thoughts on that collaboration between public education and public health. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments or questions or clarifying questions? Well, thank you, Denise. I really appreciate your service and your input today. And I really look forward to read your comments and to really look deeper into this issue. It's a very important one. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next. All right, up next.
Where I work, 1 of my 7.
Hello, up next is Chris Becerra. Could you identify yourself?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Just last a second. So is this Chris Becerra?
Yes, this is Chris Becerra. Hi, Sammy.
Hi, Chris. So the first thing I want to share with you is some instructions about the comments in the school board meeting. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. Complaints shall be handled in accordance with Board Policy KL, which is available online. The board chair has the right to terminate a speaker's privilege of address if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. I will alert you when you have 30 seconds left. And when your time is up, for the alert, since you can't see me immediately, I'll do a double tap like this, if you can hear that one.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Wonderful. And following your comments, the board will have 3 minutes to ask clarifying questions. So your time starts whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks. Corvallis School District recently shared its solution for ending systemic racism, or as they more delicately call it, inequities of structural bias. That solution was sending a link to an online course about teaching tolerance and a video of all white administrators saying how much they love and care about people of color. These proposed solutions only provide cover for a mostly white administration team to point to as they pat themselves on the back for being so tolerant. These solutions actually prevent real change. I propose more real world actions. 1, first, dissolve Franklin School. Nothing says white privilege like white flight, and nothing says white flight in Corvallis like the only public school that doesn't have a geographical boundary. You have to have the means to daily transport your child, and you have to literally win a lottery to get into. We'd save on administration and facilities costs if Franklin was closed and those students went to their neighborhood schools. The district could pledge those savings to upending their inequities of structural bias. Hire an equity or diversity director. I've been calling for this for 15 years. ESOL special ed and students with physical disabilities have a district level administrator. Part of the reason for that is that those populations need someone who is dedicated full time to making sure that they are not discriminated against. Who do students of color have? When I've asked this question of administrators, they've responded with, we are all in charge of advocating for minority students, which is another way of saying that nobody is in charge. If you go to the district's website right now, at the bottom of the page in the smallest print legible, you will see that you are supposed to file claims of discrimination with the current HR director. This is the same cis white female who has overseen hiring in the district for the last 15 years. I've had many conversations with this person and cannot recall a single time that they have actively worked to stop systemic racism inherent in the school district other than doing the legal minimum. I propose that an equity director be hired.
Just make sure you mention any personnel in the testimony, if that's okay. So let's keep it to about systems or policies, but if there's any mention of staff personnel, I would ask you to abstain.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, I won't. Thanks, Sammy. I propose that an equity director be hired directly by and report to the school board. Hiring someone who has the power to call out HR and even the superintendent is a must. If the 3 pillars of dual immersion are bilingualism, biliteracy, and biculturalism, wouldn't it make sense that the principals of our dual immersion schools are they themselves bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural? Right now, the 2 principals of our dual immersion elementary schools are not. I'm not calling out, right? Is that okay to say?
Yeah, as long as you don't mention individuals or a person.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
It.
Lincoln Elementary School needs to end its dual immersion program. The truth is, Lincoln hasn't been running a dual immersion program for many years, and a requirement of dual immersion and why it is so effective is that there must be a minimum of 33% native speakers of each language. There are many classes that only have 1 native Spanish speaker. Remember, dual immersion in our district is about teaching native Spanish speakers English. We must follow the model. We need to stop calling Lincoln a dual immersion program when it is not a dual immersion program. The good teachers and administrators there have been giving their souls to the cause, and it is hard to recruit and retain such teachers. Right now, Lincoln is dedicated to teaching native English speakers Spanish and not teaching native Spanish speakers English. District administration and principals must show where they are spending the extra ESOL money that comes from the state. For too long, this money has been tapped into and used for resources that serve white native English speaking students, then covered up and literally lied about. The district has made great strides in the last 15 years since I was the only Latino Spanish speaking employee at its dual immersion middle school, Linus Pauling. We now have a lot of Latinx employees in that school, but now it's time to expand. Can people of color contribute on all levels of the district, or must they be confined to the dual immersion schools and programs? Hire more diverse staff and don't just make them teach the brown kids. Eliminate the build and rebuild the official complaint system. Has anyone followed these steps and had their complaint even heard, let alone dealt with in a timely manner? If so, your experience is different than mine. Maybe it's because you're white. To form, the form to request emails.
So Chris, thank you very much. I really appreciate you. Your time is unfortunately up. You went to overtime. So I know you went really fast with your testimony, and I want to share with you what I shared with the previous commenter. Feel free to email the board your full comments. And that in that case, the whole board will be able to read your comments in its entirety. But
where do I email to?
School board at corvallis.or.us. Sorry, school board at corvallis.k12.or.us. And if you go to meet the school board, Corvallis School Board, on Google, you'll be able to see that email where that will go to all school board members at the same time. So
Okay, thanks.
yeah, feel free to email us your comments in its entirety. And I will open the time right now for 3 minutes for school board members if they do have any clarifying questions. First up is Director Lahui White Bear.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for bringing your thoughts in. I appreciate being able to read them later as well. I do have a question. I don't, because you talk a little bit fast for me, just how I process information. If there was specific policy stuff that you wanted to point out in that email that would be helpful for me. I like reading policies and seeing how they can be reevaluated. And so if there's something very specific that you want us to look at, I would appreciate you bringing that into that email. It was more of a comment than a question. But yeah, thank you for being here though.
Thanks.
Any other questions or clarifying questions? See none. Thank you, Chris, for your inputs. I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to read your comments. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
We don't have any further comments. So we don't have any further public comments. And for anyone who's listening to us, again, I encourage them to reach out to us through emailing the school board. We look forward to read community inputs at any point of time. Next up is bond program updates with Kim Patton. So,
Tammy,
yes,
I'd like to call a point of order. May we recess for 3 minutes?
absolutely. If there's no objection, let's have a recess for until 8:10.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go 8:12. So we'll go recess for 8:12.
Right.
The board now reconvenes from recess. Thank you, Vince, for giving us this recharge break. We needed it, definitely. So I would say next item on the agenda is bond program updates. And we have Kim and Dale. Welcome and thanks for your patience.
No problem. So in the board packet, we had a pretty extensive bond update this month. And we also had an update on the schematic design for Jefferson, Adams, and Wilson. And so I'm not going to go into very much detail today because I knew we'd have a lot on the agenda. But just know that there's quite a bit in those packets about the construction progress at Corvallis High School, Garfield, Lincoln, and Sheldon. And to know that we're deep into design on Corvallis High School, Jefferson, Adams, and Wilson, and that we've started our seismic project design at CV. And we're getting ready to start reassessing this career technical education package at CV. So I am not going to do a PowerPoint presentation today unless there's a specific plan you want to look at. So I just wanted to open the floor for questions regarding the bond program.
Thank you. I want to really appreciate your work and reports. Any questions from board members? Oh, sorry, Vince. And then Sarah.
Yeah, I'd just like to express my appreciation on behalf of the community for I can't imagine running construction projects in the middle of a pandemic. So thank you. I have two questions. One is around cost of resources as the recession is deepening. We just got notice this week that we're officially in a recession. So I'm curious about markets, both labor and materials. And then I have a question about Wilson.
Kim, can I tackle the market question?
Yes, please.
All right. So I think it'll be interesting. We had our big Lincoln Elementary School bid in January, and we are bidding Hoover as we speak, and we expect numbers in a few weeks. And we hope to bring a package to the board in a month or a month and a half for approval. So the interesting thing we're seeing so far is that there's a lot of interested subbidders. And what that almost always means is lower prices. Yay. So our theory is that a lot of subcontractors have seen projects evaporate with the pandemic, particularly ones that also worked in the private sector. And we're hoping that those folks are now looking for work. We will be cautious in our awards to subcontractors that they're qualified, because in this time, a lot of businesses are also on the edge, and we have to protect the district to make sure that the contractors that we use can actually perform the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're optimistic, and you'll be hearing fairly soon on our outcome.
Great, thank you. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so I have this wonky question. Thank you for the detailed report on the design work for these three schools. The thing that caught my eye was two schools have cafeterias, and then there's a multi-use cafeteria. And I'm just curious, what's the difference between a cafeteria and a multi-use cafeteria?
The way they're labeled on the plan. They're all supposed to be multi-use dining commons.
Okay, so.
And so essentially we're just planning them so that they can serve multiple functions. We want them to be a space where we could go in and do some hands-on real world learning when we're not using it as a eating space. Trying to think about acoustics, keeping the space a little bit smaller so it lends itself to more functionality. And we also know that we'll likely be running some after-school programs out of those spaces. So really building in the characteristics that we need for those purposes.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense because flexibility, space flexibility was a priority that came out of the design work that was highlighted in your report. So thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah.
Good questions. Thank you, Vince. Next up is Sarah and then Lou. And Jay, I don't know if I saw your real hand or no. Okay, so Sarah and then Lou.
Yeah, my question is sort of like Vince's first question about the effects of the recession on our work now and going forward. We have two things going on. We have a recession and we have a pandemic, and we have been concerned about the pandemic and how it's affecting work. And I just wanted to get an update on how things are going with safety measures in place for working during a pandemic, and what you have supply chains and things like that are looking like. How is the pandemic affecting the work we're doing?
Right. It appears that the supply chains are not suffering as badly as people were predicting. Initially, right out of the gate, we were hearing some extraordinarily long lead times to get materials, but those are starting to reduce back. So at the moment, we're not hearing of any delays to our projects due to this supply chain impact. It just hasn't materialized the way we thought it might. So that is good. The workers in the field are adapting and having to come up with new creative ways to do their work in close proximity without, potentially contaminating each other. And that involves masks and gloves and separation devices. And all of that stuff is evolving, particularly as we enter new phases of work at these sites. One of our contractors, Fortis, is actually preparing some signage that they'll post on their construction fences so that the public is aware that they are taking unique precautions as they learn how to construct in a pandemic. So we heard that today, so that was good information that Fortis provided. We have not had any shutdowns or anything as a result of the pandemic in this district. I will add that one of our projects up in kind of the eastern Washington region did suffer an impact. And it's not unusual that somebody on a construction project with 100 individuals might bring something to work. So we're crossing our fingers that we survive such things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lou.
I had a question about that too, so thanks for already asking that. And this is just like random from looking at the pictures, but I was really curious to what that bottle was they found. That was from like the 40s. I like history stuff, and that was kind of cool. A cool find that it was still intact.
Absolutely.
So random. And then the other one is was also based on looking at the pictures. It said something about like a webcam. Was that something that's being that's going to be on the webpage soon to be able to watch the construction progress?
That's correct. The bottle was it was a soda bottle, if I recall. It was made in Salem, and it had enough markings on it that the archaeology team was able to identify exactly how old it was and where it was made. It was not old enough by just a year or two to be deemed of historical significance. But we've told our contractor teams that anything like that is uncovered, the district wants to take possession of it. So we're going to collect and tag all those items that are of interest like that. If the items if it was slightly older, and I think that threshold was 75 years, then the items get treated, in an elevated fashion through the archaeology teams. So it was kind of a neat find, and I'm sure it'll just be the first of many. Second question was, I'm sorry.
Webcam. It was about the webcams are going to be on the district page, or where that was going to be.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. The webcam is in test mode, and it's pretty interesting. There's two views that are by default, and we're considering some user-controlled panning options. That's the kind of stuff we're testing right now. And then we also need to make it a real, one-click access type item. And right now it's requiring some passwords, and we're working through those obstacles. Brenda and Kim and others are helping with all that, and we hope to launch it within the next week or two. And that'll happen at Hoover and Lincoln. Lincoln has one installed already, and Hoover, they're setting it up in the next few weeks.
Wonderful, thank you. Any further questions, Lou?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Jay, you're up next.
Just on behalf of Ed, who was with us for a number of years while we were putting these projects together, I think I saw in your report, Kim, an article or an item about the tennis courts at Crescent Valley. And I'm thinking I read not to be covered by bond, but to be resurfaced in August. Do I have it right?
Yes, this summer we're resurfacing versus replacing. We had originally planned to replace, but it's not going to pan out cost-wise with budget cuts that are coming. So we're looking at a crack filling and resurfacing to get some extended life out of those courts.
Thank you. Good deal.
Any further questions? Well, thank you for the work. We really appreciate your work, and the construction teams and everyone is doing this really amazing and difficult work. And we look forward to see the schools built and open for our children to be in them and learn. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Thanks for the support.
Absolutely. Ryan.
I feel like oftentimes when we're doing this, I highlight the work that Kim's doing along with the team from Wenaha. But right now we're, the public comment that Denise shared about spaces and health, and the piece I shared in my superintendent's report about transportation and 3 feet separation between students and classrooms and 35 square feet. All those things are also on Kim's shoulders right now. And so for somebody who is balancing a large scale bond construction project, as well as trying to set up systems that keep our students safe in the fall, is a giant feat. And so again, thanks Kim for your work. And I know she isn't sleeping much right now trying to put it all together. And we really appreciate it. It would have been a fantastic, unbelievable time just to be doing construction. And that's happening in the middle of a pandemic. So again, a big shout out to Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And make sure you get some good sleep. Wonderful. Well, thanks a lot. And next up is the consolidated action. So as a reminder, the items under the portion of consolidated action of the agenda are for action. Does anyone have a question about anything in consolidated action? If you do, please indicate what you want to pull out first, and then we'll go over them one by one. So Vince, which items you want to pull out first?
I just have a question, a general question about resolution 20-0602, transfer of appropriations.
Transfer of appropriation. Anything else?
No, that's it for me.
All right, Lou, what items you want to discuss?
JEC.
Could you, JEC admissions, correct?
Admissions, yeah, sorry. That's the
Wonderful. So anything else? And Jay?
I just have a comment and a question about the topic non-licensed personnel information.
Non-licensed personnel action. All right. So I want to just remind you one thing, which is we're not allowed to comment or ask questions that are specific to personnel. I usually ask a question that is general if there's any themes that we're learning about retaining our faculty at this time. So just a reminder if that's a question that you want to ask, but we can't really mention specific names.
Did he say non-licensed or licensed?
Oh, I have a clarification from our secretary. Did you say non-licensed or licensed?
None.
None.
That's consolidated information.
So that's consolidated information. And does the same comment stands? And the same comment also stands. All right, so let's go first on C, resolution number 20-0602, transfer of appropriation in general funds, district donation funds. And I think that question was from Vince. State your questions.
So Olivia, I just have a question about, the rationale for these transfers of funds. Because it wasn't apparent in the report.
No, that's okay. These are kind of standard end of year transactions for us as we monitor spending throughout the year. We're looking to see if we anticipate exceeding any categorical appropriations. And so when we think that's going to happen, we generally come to the board and ask for those transfers so that we can get everything in alignment and make sure that we're in compliance at the end of the year prior to our audit. So that's what that's all about. It's all about meeting compliance with local budget law.
So just to confirm my understanding, this is just moving resources around to align with expected or projected expenditures.
Yes, absolutely. There's 3 funds that were, I'm sorry, there's 4 funds that we believe will exceed one of the categorical appropriations. The general fund is in the community services function. And so we want to make sure we have coverage there. The donation fund, same thing, it's the community services function. In the last several months, we've been spending more funds in this area, especially around this community supports to our families. And so that's the primary reason for those. And then the designated facilities fund has to do with the Lincoln Health Center construction, which we want to make sure that we're in alignment with that. And then the designated revenue fund. Oh, I'm sorry. The designated revenue fund is where there's a big change, and that's associated with the Lincoln Health Center. The board had taken action earlier this year around the design of the health center. This is to address the upcoming construction. So that IGA is like almost in place by the Benton County Board of Commissioners. And so we anticipate that there will be some spending before June 30th. And so we just want to make sure that we have the appropriations there for that. The designated facilities fund is has to do with a modular that was at College Hill that was removed. And we had like 2 months of spending that we didn't necessarily anticipate for when we budgeted. And so that's a cleanup.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Any other questions on this item from other board members? Appreciate it. Thanks, Olivia. So next item we have is board policy JEC admissions. If I remember correctly, that was Lou.
Yeah, the last time we seen this, I had a question on why the Illegal Immigration and Immigration Reform Act of 1996 is cited, and there wasn't anything in this packet that said why it's still in there.
Okay.
And yeah, and also the links on there don't work, just FYI. So, because I read each of the legal references, all the Oregon statutes and Senate bills to see how it linked. Like I literally read every single one of them, but I had to look up the last 3 because those links don't work.
Okay. So just a clarifying question on the second one, when you tried the links, was it in the consolidated packet or was it in the single file?
Both.
Okay, thank you.
And all the other links worked.
Okay.
But that one, those 3 for some reason, I think it's just how it's something wrong. I believe, let me double check. Yeah, it says file or directory not found again. So yeah, but my question still stands of why that's in there.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So do we have a clarification from staff?
Erica, do you have a clarification on that?
I'm going back to the old board packet to see if it was in the report.
You mean the first time we seen it?
Correct.
I don't think so, because that's when I asked it was the first time we seen it. But it may be.
So while Erica works on this, I want to check in with Jay. Do you have a question that's non-policy? Maybe we can get to and then come back for the policy.
I want to ask Lou again, was her question, why is there a reference to that law? Or what impact did that have on the policy? I wasn't clear what her question was.
Yeah, I was asking why it is listed on this particular policy as a source, how it relates to the policy.
And Sammy, my comment, but I'm not swearing by it, relates to the material that is lined out asking for people who register at school to produce a birth certificate showing their date of birth. And I think that the act wiped that out and said, we're not going to have people do that. But I'm just remembering from a couple of years ago that was the focus. I would just say that's my best remembrance.
So your hypothesis or possible explanation is that the reason of striking through the old to the new and striking through the paragraph is that referenced law, correct? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That was my understanding of the reason for the change.
Okay, thank you. Erica?
I would be really surprised if that law informs that decision to not show a birth certificate, considering it's an extremely xenophobic federal law that prevents people that are undocumented from seeking education in the United States from K-12 through college. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because that law in particular was written in a way where it limits people's ability to seek education.
Yeah, so that reference was not added. I did not find it. I believe I recall that Melissa spoke to it when you asked the question. There isn't anything specific in the policy that actually stems from that law or that reference in particular. It's more about the fact that we cannot ask for the proof of birth when we enroll students.
So that's why it's in there, because I would like to know where it's at in there actually, because a lot of it doesn't really align with the policy itself, other parts of that act. And so I'm a little bit like confused as to exactly why it's a reference in something, because it does send a very specific message to people that would read this policy in particular. And that's why I brought it up in the first place. I'm like, why is this in there? Just knowing the history of that act in general. And that's why I brought it up as to like, why is this in one of our policies?
Yeah.
So I did do a quick search and I found that we did pose that question to OSBA. The understanding that they sent back to us was that that legal reference also supports that immigration status cannot be used to deny admission to a public school, even though there's not language that's specific in that legal reference for admissions.
Okay, maybe we read laws differently, because that's not like how I read that law when I looked at it, but I'm also not like a lawyer. But I think that there's a lot open to interpretation in there, and I would recommend that if we did have something that has that law in there, just because it has a lot of negative history and impacts, and it does limit people's ability to actually go to school. So I'm surprised that they would think that, but like we don't have anything about DACA on there or Oregon Sanctuary Law or on House Bill 3464, which are all local Oregon laws that protect students that are undocumented, is not listed in here, but that one is, that actually puts students at risk. So I was just kind of wanting some clarification of like why we would include that one, but not the ones that actually protect students that are undocumented or for mixed families.
If you'd like to send me the specific question, I can follow it up with OSBA and get the answer for you.
Okay. So ask you basically the specific laws, why they're not in there and that one's in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Lou. Sarah, do you have a comment or a question about this specific policy?
Well, I'm getting more and more uncomfortable with that law being cited in this policy as Lou talks. And so I'm pleased. It sounds like Lou can submit a question that we can get more clarification on that before we adopt this policy. I also am wondering if for some reason we are required to have that law cited, if there would be a way to have an explanation of why it's there as part of the policy rather than just citing the law with no explanation.
Yeah. Thank you. Erica, do you have a comment on that?
I will just hold that policy then for you guys.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Vince, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just have a recommendation on engaging OSBA. I just recommend that you CC Lou on the email when you reach out, because Lou has expertise that probably the legal team and the policy team at OSBA don't have, and they don't have the understanding that she has. So I think that she can explain maybe some gaps in their understanding. And I think it'll help them navigate that inquiry.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And Lou, if you could email it to Julie or Lindsay, to Erica directly. So you can email it to Erica directly and copy Lindsay.
Okay.
And yeah, personally, I'm just thinking out loud. I think reflecting on your question, not sure why the act is there. And also, would it be precluded from being authoritative in this situation, given the Oregon laws? And that's our local for us, and they might be over that one. So I'll leave it to, I think I trust to your questions that will clarify this, Cloud. Therese?
Oh, really quick, thanks Sammy for pointing that out. And also, like, the reason why I'm asking so much about it is because policies actually tell a story too. And when people see what is laid out in front of them as references that inform policies, that's also important to keep in mind. Maybe I'm the only one that reads references, probably not. So that's just something I really wanted to say why I'm asking questions about it, because we need to be careful on the story we're telling our families and our community about what kind of district we are and who's welcome in our district. And so that's why I'm asking these questions and making these recommendations.
Absolutely. And I personally wholeheartedly agree with you. Your comments are definitely in line with our policies and resolutions that speak on this matter. So we gotta walk the talk on that. Thank you. Therese?
I meant to just give an agreement, but I think I might have raised my hand, but I was just wanting to agree about copying Lou on the communication. I think that will help shorten the back and forth, because I suspect that what Lou is trying to understand and what I think would be good for all of us to understand might not be coming through clearly. And so if we could just loop her into that, I'm sure that would be helpful. And I wanted to say, I appreciate you bringing that back up, Lou, because I do remember our conversation about that. And I did think, but I didn't go back to double check, but I did think when we were looking through the packet, I'm not sure that actually answered the question, but I don't have time to go back and hunt it down. And so I'm really glad that you did and that you took the time to do that, because I do think that we didn't get the spirit of what was being asked. It doesn't seem like we quite have that answer. And so I'm glad that we can pull it and we can revisit it. I do think that it's important. My understanding of that, I think, is much more similar to yours, Lou. I'm confused about why it would be being perceived or being attached to something that otherwise would be meant to be perceived as positive. Maybe there's a reason, but then we would need to footnote that so that other folks are not confused. Because for individuals for whom that there's a history or an understanding, they will see the language, they'll see the reference, and without some kind of context to understand why it's being referenced, understandably, completely reasonably, they will say, I don't know that I want anything to do with anything that is citing something that hasn't positively impacted people. So if that reference needs to be there, we need to state why.
Mhm. Thank you. So I see consensus on pulling it out. Vince, do you have a question or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I definitely want to make sure that the board, here's the end of the story. I know that I'm glad that folks support having Lou looped in on the interaction with OSBA, but I mean, when this comes back for approval, I definitely want to hear the rest of the story.
Absolutely.
Where this ends.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at Ryan and Erica as well. Probably the best medium for that after when we get this, it will be in the cover page. It will give a thorough explanation of how that went. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for this discussion and for bringing this up. Any other questions on the consolidated action or any item in the consolidated action? So seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the consolidated action, excluding item G2, which is policy JEC.
I move to approve consolidated action.
Okay. You need to have the full motion.
I cannot have that many screens open at once. So someone else will have to read it.
No, it's basically your motion is good, but if you want to exclude a policy, you need to call that out to pull it out.
Okay. On behalf of Director Jones, I move to approve consolidated action, omitting item G2 policy JEC.
Do I hear a second from Therese? Or
Yes,
anyone?
you do. I second. I apologize. Right as you told me to restate that, the dog, well, he took over the room and I had to mute myself so that people could hear. So I second.
Thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded by Director Adams and seconded by Director Jones to approve the consolidated action excluding policy JEC. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Director Conroy.
Aye.
Director Baker.
Aye.
Director White Bear.
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Vice Chair Finger McDonald. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Director Adams.
Aye.
And I vote aye. It passes unanimously. Motion passes. All right, so now next item on the agenda is consolidated information. As a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for discussion. Would anyone like to discuss an item in consolidated information? Yeah, Jay, you have one?
Yes, I wanted to discuss the non-licensed personnel information and have one question.
Okay. Any other items? Vince?
Yes, I'd like to pull the sustainability report.
Me too. Anyone else? Or anything else? All right, see none. Let's go first with non-licensed personnel information, and then we'll go to Bailey. Jay, you're muted.
I thought I had the system down. I just wanted to pull that because I wanted to recognize individuals who are listed on there that are retiring. And as a person who is deeply into school buildings and school districts, the people who are leaving, some of them I think need attention. And forgive me then if I can't mention specific names. It's a positive comment.
Okay, yes.
All right. I just know that the people whose names are listed there were near and dear to my work at Corvallis High, including Judy Welliver and Linda Keller, and also Cindy Dadges and Debbie Zeidema, all of whom were, I would call them heart and soul of the school kind of people. That is, they carried the warmth and the positiveness and the touch for kids in the buildings that I was working with, Cindy at the district office, and I'm sure those other people as well. So I just wanted to say from a deep heart, they are absolutely going to be missed, and congratulations again for all they've done. I have a question after we all take that into consideration.
Ryan, want to add something to that? And
So adding to what Jay just shared, at the last district-wide Zoom meeting, we had a chance to recognize all of our retirees. And, you know, it's really unique to be in a school district where there are so many staff who have been in the district for 20, 30, 40 years with us. And that's fairly common here, which really highlights that it is a special place to be and a special place to work, and a community that is special to be a part of. So I'm glad you called that out, Jay. And it is just really phenomenal when you start to look at that list of our retirees and how long they've been with us. It's pretty exceptional.
thank you so
Can
much.
I ask a question related then?
Yes.
And again, I'm not clear because Ryan, in your budget discussions, you talked about a quote hiring freeze. But when you lose these people, are you talking about not filling their positions, or what will be the status of those positions? If you
So we are looking at each individual position that needs to be filled. And so there will be some positions that do get filled, but they primarily will be hard to fill positions. And at the same time, continuing to look at staff within our district who has that experience and expertise as well. And making those shifts is also important as a way to address cost right now and keep a strong student-centered workforce employed. So those are the kinds of considerations that we're making with all the positions that are being filled.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear with public and how that was going to get carried out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you so much for the shout out to our retirees. Sarah. Sarah, you're still muted.
Since Jay mentioned a few people on the list and this meeting is being broadcast, I want to recognize the other people who are retiring by name. So Elaine Stiles, who was a custodian, and custodians are often the heroes of schools who keep our environment healthy, and kids all know who they are. Heather Reich, Kathy Kunke, and I think the other one who was not mentioned was Christine Baxter. So thank you to all of them also for their service.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is really great. Well, and I really appreciate you acknowledging our retirees. Thank you so much. Anyone else? All right. Next up is to the sustainability reports. Vince, go, and then I'll follow you unless there's someone else as well.
Well, again, I mean, it's another point where we get to be very thankful for the community that we live in and the district that we get to serve. You know, I just want to applaud the efforts of the sustainability coordinator in the district. The first year of a project is always challenging, but no one anticipated a pandemic hitting in the first year of our sustainability coordinator. Despite this adversity, Bailey has been successful in establishing much needed human infrastructure and advancing sustainability initiatives across the coming years. And I just want to highlight a few things, you know, the marked increase in staff and student leadership around sustainability, that over 3/4 of schools completed waste audits. That is an unpleasant task, and I have participated in one, but one that's really important because you can't change what you don't measure. And to that point, that Bailey has created for us a tracking dashboard. He's created indicators so that we can see our progress towards goals. And you know, he had the courage to note that there was an increase in water consumption instead of greenwashing that statistic. but he noted a lot of reductions in consumption, particularly around energy. We've had robust incorporation of sustainability in the design work in our new schools. And Ryan, you and Sammy and the rest of the folks there at the district office, you're right next to our brand new 170 kilowatt solar array that is saving the district almost $20,000 a year. Bailey has already started building partnerships between the district and the community, which is possibly the biggest return on investment in investing in this work. So the point I'm trying to make is that in just 1 year, a year marked by tremendous organizational and community disruption, the district and its sustainability coordinator have put points on the board with regards to sustainability. And I'm completely delighted with the follow through and the focus of the superintendent and staff that they've demonstrated this year. And I'm very much looking forward to the work going forward. Bailey, I have 2 questions for you. I really want to know, besides the pandemic, what was your biggest challenge? And then what was your biggest accomplishment this year?
I'll start with the accomplishment first, and thank you for the kind words. And thanks to all the directors. I'm so proud to be in a school district where my kids get to be students in the district that your directors have. So thank you. I know it's a lot of work that the directors do. I'd say as far as accomplishments, I think the biggest thing that jumps out is seeing students involved, having student green teams forming. There were some schools that had them, but seeing the student leadership and seeing the teachers, each of the schools has a sustainability leader, and each of them is in charge with, running the green teams and carrying out some of the plans in the management plan. So seeing the student engagement, I think, has been the biggest success, and seeing more students involved in schools that never had or haven't had in a long time, green teams. That's been wonderful, and that it's student-led, I think, is the biggest win that I've seen. I'd say, the obvious challenge is the pandemic, and it's been disappointing to see, outdoor school and the bike classes and just a lot of the activities that tend to happen around the spring and the end of the school year. So that's been the biggest letdown, I'd say. But despite that, I've seen a lot of, really the members of each school's green team leader and the community really pull together to be able to just, the word I'm learning is pivot. And I'm really seeing a lot of pivoting happening, and just how we're able to adjust what sustainability looks like.
Well, tremendous work, Bailey. The school board heard a lot from folks that are passionate about sustainability in our community. We know that's a priority for our community, and you have definitely answered that call. So thank you very, very much. And I really look forward to sharing this report far and wide.
Thank you.
Lou?
Okay, I muted it this time. It was just a comment that when I read through the report, it almost seemed like you were a little bit apologetic in it because of the pandemic. And I just wanted to say, don't be apologetic in your report. Like it was really clear that some great things happen for the community in general, and especially with our students. And so that just kind of stood out to me. And I wanted to let you know to not let that get you down, because it was really an incredible report to read, especially considering the pandemic. And it was really nice to see something positive be produced too. And like, we've been seeing some positive things with a lot of things, but like, that was cool too. That was all. It was a comment, not a question.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Vince.
I guess the next question is, what's next? I mean, I know that there's a lot of uncertainty about next year, but I mean, what are 2 or 3 things that you want to try and get done next year?
That's really changed a lot. I'm beginning to start to plan out what my intentions will be for next year. Some of the things that I'd hoped to accomplish feel like maybe they'll need to be put off a little bit. So I'd like to continue strengthening the green teams and being sure that we have a sustainability connection at every school. And you know, some of the things that I'd hope to do, I'll just throw out an example. Increasing the awareness of share tables and reducing food waste. There might be more challenges to doing that this year. And so this, and one of the areas that I've really wanted to focus on and just didn't have time to get to this year is transportation and encouraging walking and biking, and you know, busing might be, that might provide challenges as well. But walking and biking, I think, are still, you know, achievable and good goals to look at. So I think I'm just going to shift a little bit what I might have otherwise focused on and put more emphasis in things that are going to be more achievable.
Well, thanks so much for all that you've done and really moving the ball downfield for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Bailey, I want to share with you the first time I read the report. I read it how Sami, when he was in 6th grade, would read the report, which is skimming quickly into how much energy generated by the solar panels. That's basically in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, as not driving an average passenger car for 421,880 miles. And immediately I did the calculation. The circumference of the Earth is 24,901. So that means we can drive that car for almost 17 times around the Earth, only with the solar panels. So that was how Sami, 6th grade, would read it. And then I realized to myself, reading it again, that this is not what Sami, 6th grade in Corvallis School District would experience. He would go much deeper than just that arithmetic. That's interesting. And be able to go in depth to understand sustainability and how you can, as an individual, contribute to make our community more sustainable and see the interaction between systems. So thank you. You're just making me again wish I can go back in time to be in school, to be a student of this great district with the work that you're doing. It's more engagement than what I even imagined is possible when I was in school. So thank you. And I want to also mention from the other angle that I see your work through the coalition on the steering committee. I read some reports where I see that you're engaged with the community and informing the community about the work of the district, so the community can see what the district is doing and being involved and engaged. So one question I might have for you, if there's any community member who's interested in getting involved, is there an opportunity to do that, and how to do that?
Yeah, certainly. One of the great connections that I've had is through this Corvallis Sustainability Coalition. And there's the Education Action Team is one of their teams. And they've paired a member with each school's sustainability leader to kind of provide them support and help. And so that's a great way to start out. The Corvallis Environmental Center is also doing great work, providing a lot of education and really also working to shift things to offline and virtual learning. So I think they'll be a great partner with the uncertainty of how things will look in the fall. There are many ways. I'm creating a matrix of environmental groups and sustainability connections in general. Doesn't need to be environmental specifically. And already have 60 organizations, and I'm trying to pair how, say, a 4th grade teacher can connect with classroom presentations or field trips or online learning or what have you. So there's just, being in Corvallis, there's just an enormous resource to tap into.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your work. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Bailey, and congratulations on your 1 year. Ryan.
Thank you all.
Yeah, just
sorry.
No problem. Just again to highlight sort of how this came to be. It was a conversation that lasted the better part of a year about what the role would be and what the position would look like. We worked with a outside consultation firm to better identify what the needs were of the district before filling the position with Bailey, fortunately for us. And then to see the work that's happened this year and into the future, I just think it, again, says a lot about who this community is, and appreciate his work.
Thank you.
And support from the board to make it so.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Bailey, again. Well, with that, I think that concludes our consolidated information, unless there's anything else. See none, let's go for the election of officers for 2020-2021, and we'll start with the election of the chair. We don't need a motion, just names of people you would like to nominate for the position of board chair for 2020-2021. Does anyone wish to make a nomination? I have Vince.
I nominate Sami Al-Abdraba to be chair of the Corvallis School Board.
Thank you. I accept that nomination. Any other nominations? Hearing no objections or further, is there any objections? Hearing no objections or further nominations, the nominations are closed. So if we have multiple candidates, they will state why they will be a good chair. I would not bore you with my 30-minute speech, but all what I want to say, thank you for your support. I've learned through the last year or through this year how serving on the board is really a teamwork. I appreciate Sarah calling me out when I can do things better, and all of you when you give me the advice. So I really appreciate it. And please continue to hold me accountable and tell me how we can run meetings better and how we can do things better. I really appreciate the support through the year and looking forward to continue that. So we don't need election. We don't need a motion or any votes, right?
Right. Just
Take a vote. All right, so we'll take a vote on the nomination of the chair. All those in favor say, Vince, what's your vote?
I vote aye. You should be board chair.
Jay?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Sarah? Tina?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Thank you. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. And the new chair duties are effective July 1st, 2020. So Samuel Abdul will continue to be the chair. I appreciate your support, and please continue to hold me accountable to continue serving the board and the community. So for vice chair, we don't need a motion, just names of the people you would like to nominate for the position of board vice chair for 2020-2021. Does anyone wish to make a nomination? All right, Vince, what's your nomination?
I nominate Sarah Finger McDonald to vice chair of the Corvallis School Board.
Sarah,
I accept the nomination.
wonderful, thank you. Any further nominations or objections? See none, the nominations are closed. So is there anything you want to share, Sarah? It's not mandatory.
No, I feel like these leadership positions there's a learning curve, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue for another year. Now that my feet are wet, I feel like this year it's the things that have been going on. It's where my feet that have gotten wet, but I'm I'm pleased to serve.
All right, so we'll take the vote. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate your help and support and stepping up whenever I need your help, which is all the time. So thank you. So we'll take the vote. And Jay, what's your vote?
Aye.
Therese, what's your vote?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Vince?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So Sarah Finger McDonald's is the new vice chair. The vice chair duties are effective July 1st, 2020. So elections are completed, and thank you all for the support. Now we'll go for board member comments, and I know there's several topics or
Sammy, can I
Yeah.
make a comment?
Yes, please.
So a couple months ago, I gave up a perfectly good job at Oregon State University to teach governance to school boards in Oregon. Governance is something that I take really seriously because I know it matters to the outcomes for kiddos. And that's why I kind of jumped on those nominations, because I feel kind of strongly about how our board has been led this year during the hardest of times to lead a decision-making body. So what I've observed is that our school board has been thoughtful, responsive, and efficient, particularly our leadership, that our meetings have been civil, congenial, and very productive. I really appreciate that both Sammy, you and Sarah are engaged with OSBA and are in leadership roles. Sammy, you're on the Caucus of Color, and Sarah, you're on the Legislative Policy Committee. I feel that you both have very good situational awareness and have shared that with your fellow board members. But above all, you've remained focused on our board goals and our district strategic plan, and maintaining students at the center. So I really have appreciated your leadership over the last year. And that's why I jumped on those nominations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vince.
Appreciate it. It's I get to realize every day this is not about me. It's about the team and the community and the children. And you all really remind me of that every day. And it's really grounding. So really, thank you very much for your thoughts. So for board member comments, I know there are several topics. So any board member would like to discuss any topic or any item? Vince and Jay.
So I have two that I'd like to discuss. One is a discussion around maybe a resolution or something like that. The other is procedural, and I'm just going to blurt it out. Whoever has been taking down my hands up during the meeting, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't know if that's Julie or if thank you, Julie. That is really helpful. And then I'll defer on the second one because there will probably be other comments around that.
Ryan tells you need to learn this for the next meeting.
How to put my hand down? No, I go to look to put my hand down and it's already down. I love it. It's really helpful.
Just because Julie is not going to be there in the next meeting. All right. So we have a discussion about resolution. Jay, what items or topics you want to discuss?
Well, I guess I'm back on board member comments. Is it still okay to talk about comments?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Sarah for your good leadership. You are team players, you are caring for kids, you are deeply involved. It's clear you're working closely with the superintendent, but all of us. And so I appreciate you both in your hard work. In terms of two resolutions or concerns, I forwarded to Sammy, because I'm not sure what to avoid a chain mail. I forwarded it to Sammy two articles that I dug out regarding school resource officers. One is from the Kappan, an educational leaders journal, talking about the good, the bad, and the quote ugly of school resource officers. And then also a study done by Leadership for Educational Equity, which I think brings voices from ranging from the ACLU to the School Resource Office Association and the pluses and minuses. So I urge you all to maybe look at those to give you some background. I'm back with Lou about listening hard to people locally, but also trying to put a bigger context on it. And my last comment deals with elections. And I've given Sammy a couple thoughts over the months. I'm here to announce or to say that I know we have elections coming up in what, 11 months or 10 months, and we may create a new school board, as in new faces. And so I'm really going to push early in the next month or two for an amendment to our policies that allow for the new board, whoever's faces are there, to do this election. I have absolutely no problem with the election we had today because this same board will work in July. But when there's the possibility of a new set of faces, my political science background says the new group should elect the new leader. And I have heard concerns, and I've talked to Sammy about going to look at nearby districts and other school board association bylaws. And I think there's a way to cover our legalities, having the named people to sign checks or whatever it's supposed to do, but also to then come up with the new board faces being responsible for electing new leadership. So I just wanted to clarify that as we move forward.
Thank you, Jay. And I'll put that as well. Any board member would like to add something for future board agenda item for the new year, please mention that as well, and I'll note it down. So I put that down there. And just for the context, there's these two challenging, conflicting things we need to explore, and we'll consult with OSBA. The first one is the point that Jay mentioned, and the other one is the continuity of board leadership until you have the first meeting. And Jay and I discussed a couple of possibilities: interim chair or chair that expires by the beginning of the meeting, and then you do the election. So there's several ways, but possibly we will consult with OSBA about the best path forward with that, and we'll bring it to the board. But I really appreciate Jay mentioning that, and your patience that we could do it actually within the year without an impact on this. Any other comments? We have Therese.
Yes, I just want to, I'd like to further discuss the relationship with our local law enforcement and the role of, or whether we should continue to have a school resource officer.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, when I second what Therese said, I think we just need to look really carefully at that relationship and consider how it impacts our families and students. And so you have strong consideration and lots of voices, voices who were impacted in the conversation. I was a little bit disturbed to hear that the students felt like their conversation was cut short. I think that's not what we intend to do with student voice, and I want to make sure that it's not done, especially in something that's this critical. The other thing, this is not really something we need to discuss, but I will tell you that since ODE released their guidance yesterday, I've been hearing lots of murmurings and comments and things from a range of I won't feel safe with the standards that OSBA has set, to we should just open schools like they have always been opened. And yeah, I think the ODE's guidance being in the news has led to a new round of anxiety about school opening. And so we just need to make sure we're communicating well with our community about what it's going to look like and what we know and when. New thing happened during this board meeting. Somebody texted me and commented on something that was said. Please, if you have comments, if anybody's still watching, I don't know who it was because I don't have you in my contacts list. If you have comments about what's being said or discussed in a board meeting, please email the school board, and you can find our email address if you go to the district website, about us, meet the board, and the individual emails are there and the email for the whole board is there. you have comments, please make them there, because my personal phone, it's a great way to contact me, to call me, but if I don't know who you are and you just text me a comment in the middle of a meeting, I'm not going to necessarily know what you're talking about 2 days later. So yeah, put it in an email to the board. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Lou?
Yeah, mine was related to the school resource officers as well, that we have further conversation about that. I'm particularly interested on what sort of actions that school boards can take around this, not just beyond just conversations, like is there any action that can be taken? I think that the students coming and talking to us shows that they're, at least the students that spoke, of course, not every single student, but the students that spoke felt unsupported by the conversations that they've tried to have so far, and came to us to ask for action. That's why I asked for clarification on what they were asking for from us.
Absolutely, thank you. So it seems to be the one with most thoughts on so far is the SRO. So if there's any comments, and also definitely any further comments, and definitely we'll put it as a board agenda. But maybe one thing that will guide us is if you have questions or clarifying questions that you hope that Ryan could tackle, in addition to the notes that he took earlier today about what things we were asking for. So let's start with the SRO. Who would like to speak further about it other than what we heard so far? Or do we feel we explored all the questions and the comments? Yes, Therese.
I guess I'd like to pointedly open the conversation about whether or not there is still a place in our district for a school resource officer.
Thank you. Vince.
Sorry, trying to unmute. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think identifying questions is fine right now. We've had a lot of really good discussion around this. I think we need to let the superintendent go and do some engagement and build a process to have this conversation. I think right now, if we dig into this, I can see if we could be here for another 2 hours talking about school resource officers in schools. So I would like to see staff do some work, do some broad engagement, and then I would like to hear from our officers, our counseling staff, folks in the community. And I mean, maybe it's going to be a superintendent community with board members, a board member as a liaison, something like that. But I think the superintendent needs to have boots on the ground and be engaged.
Thanks, Vince. And I want to, sorry, go ahead.
Well, with a broad cross section of the community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're hearing from one side of this argument. I haven't encountered this yet, but there are parents that probably appreciate having law enforcement officers because they're worried about, say, school shootings. So there's another side to this that needs to be heard, and it needs to be fully sussed out.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think the sentiments, as I have my individual conversations with board members, and not necessarily, I would not relay it to each other. So I want to just synthesize the sentiments of our board members that they want to have this conversation, and we want to have a really, as we heard right now, a full engagement with the community about this. So I really support bringing this up, and hopefully we can have Ryan engage the community. But I'm hearing also board members really wish to be closely engaged while being very mindful about the governance boundaries where we get engaged in terms of operations, and also how we are engaged through funding and policies. But we want to really be there to listen and to be engaged in a way or another. That's maybe the synthesis of what I heard from board members, and feel free to correct me or provide another angle if you have one. Sarah, Therese, and then Lou.
Well, I think one thing that makes me comfortable with not rushing into making a decision immediately is that we are not paying for our SRO out of our school district budget right now. And so we're not making a decision right now that would impact whether we have money for a counselor or professional development training that could impact bias in discipline or something like that. It's not coming out of our budget right now, which I think, although I don't think it takes away the immediacy of this concern, it does on the day we passed a budget. We're not paying for that right now out of our budget. So I think it gives us a little bit of space, but I don't want to put this off too long because I think it is an issue that is vital to the community right now. I had another thought. Oh, it was about whether school resource officers prevent school shootings, and I'm sure parents have their own opinions about that, but I have a very strong one too. So
I wasn't necessarily articulating my own opinion. I've just encountered parents in the district that might very likely have that point of view.
It feels safer for them for some reason. Yes.
By the way, I did not get back to you, Jay, on your email or attachments. Feel free, if you would like, to forward them to the school board, as long as no one replies and say, here's what I think about it over email. I think that's kosher. So feel free to do that. And if you want me, I'll be happy to forward it, whatever you're comfortable with. So next, Therese, and then Lou.
I'd like to defer to Lou first. I've already had an opportunity to comment, so I'll do that.
All right, Lou.
It's fine, Therese.
Or,
I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Lou next.
I think you should go next because you may bring up something, and then if you've already stated it, then I can just nod. And so
I just wanted to point out that I think we're past conversation mode around this, and there's inaction also sends a message. And I think that's important to think about. Like, yeah, we can put off conversations about school resource officers and whether or not they should be in Corvallis schools. But what's been asked is that action be taken, and that's coming from students and it's coming from community. And inaction is also a response. And a lot of times inaction is used as a way to limit movement from happening. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but I do want to point that out, that also sends a message to the community. And that's important to realize as a school board and as a district. So there's that, and also what's already been said about the perception of safety and whose safety is being valued above others, and whose safety is always prioritized compared to people whose safety is not prioritized. And so those are some of the things that are coming through my mind when we're talking about school resource officers and having conversations in nationally, locally here in Corvallis. People are saying they don't want conversations anymore, they want actions, and that's why I keep reiterating that.
Thank you. Teresa, on the sentiments of those who did not speak first, let's have Tina first, and then after they're done, we go to you. Tina.
I just want to say I agree with Lou about we've had a lot of conversation. We can sit around to keep going in circles around this, but I also want to say that I agree with Lou about inaction speaks loud. It kind of speaks to being slow walk to no resolution, or slow walk to nobody's hearing what our community members are trying to say, and it's just a brush off. So we need to be mindful of, taking too long to find a solution, or, and no action is just, like I said, being slow walked somewhere, and it's not appropriate.
Thank you, Tina. Therese, and then Vince.
So I suspected that if others went first, they may have things to add that were in line with my own, and that is what happened. So I'm glad that they were able to share that. I agree with the sentiments of both of them. I want to just clarify that when I say that I want to bring this up, I'm not suggesting that this evening we entertain a plan that we then tell the superintendent we want to roll out. I obviously recognize that that would not be the appropriate course of action to do justice to the topic and to make sure that we have done our due diligence in looking at information. What I am saying is that I think that as a board, what needs to happen from us and what can happen this evening is for us to say that we have an expectation that we hear back. These are the things that we hear back on, and that at that point at which we hear back on them, we will take action, and that cannot be next year. This is an imminent topic. It's in front of us right now. So, you know, I definitely want us to be wise, because there are obviously many moving parts. And that said, if we were to just say, well, thank you, community, for sharing, and then we don't make a plan for what we're going to do, what we're going to ask for, then we are not being proactive. And that time has come. I did not hear any ambiguity in the communication from community members about what they would like to see happen. Not everyone spoke. Obviously, I totally hear and agree that we heard from a portion of the community around a perspective. That said, we don't have a history of hearing from people at length. We want the school resource officer relationship to end. We have a lot of history of hearing and having reports about the school resource officer. And so these are new voices to the conversation. And new voices, and that's not true. They're not new voices to the conversation. They've been plenty willing. They have not been received. Now there is a climate in which, in large scale, these voices are finding ways to be heard. And I think that Corvallis, we are a district that attempts to lead. And this is our opportunity to lead rather than lag. And I would like to see us lead rather than lag.
Thanks, Therese. Vince, and maybe Jay?
Yeah, I went back to my notes from when the students were speaking, and I mean, when asked directly, they asked that they be included in a policy discussion where student voice, and I think marginalized voices, are elevated. And I would submit that a process like that, no matter what the policy outcome would be, we don't know what that is action. And I think it's an important action for this board to take, because we as a board have identified community engagement as a place where we need to grow, where the district can grow. And so I think that we should take our own advice and step into this and lean into this process. But part of that is going to be having difficult conversations with folks that we haven't heard from in the past. And that is action.
Thank you. I want to pause here unless there is someone with urgent questions, and asks Ryan, do you have any clarifying questions, or do you feel we have a good direction on how you could move forward with this topic?
So I've heard a couple of themes. The first theme is action. I've also heard a theme of prior to action to engage community. And I've also heard making sure that community includes voices of community members that have historically been marginalized. And so those are the students and family, not just one group. So I may have misspoken just a second ago, I'm not sure. But those are the kind of the three consistent themes I've heard throughout. So understanding that the first one around action, also there was a component about not taking action or delaying action also sends a message. So there's an immediacy to this, or an expediency to this piece. In terms of the component around community engagement. There's groups that come to mind for me pretty quickly about how to do community engagement around it. So I don't know that I have. So now that I've sort of said it back to you, are there pieces that I have left out, or things that you didn't hear me say that you've been thinking about, or feel like you tried to communicate and I didn't hear? I sort of want to have that in echo form. I want to have that back to you so you can make sure I'm square.
Sorry, I prematurely clicked the unmute from my side. Lou.
Yeah, the only thing, Ryan, that I would encourage you to think about is instead of just including voices that aren't usually heard in these conversations, is to center them. There's a big difference between inclusion and like centering people. And I think that would make a big difference on what's created and what's heard. Yeah, and I'd love to see us move more towards a centering than inclusivity.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And on that, I'm reminded with our guiding principles and values, really all students feel safe, and the buildings are not there unless they are for the people, and the schools are there for the students. So any resources, any programs should be grounded by what's best for the students and centered by students' experience, and make sure that we're centered with the students who have not been heard. So definitely that would be an important criteria for us as we move forward. That's where we're driven by that value, and we continue to do so on this topic. Jay?
I remember from maybe 2 board meetings back, we as a board also agreed that we would try to do better in the year ahead in terms of our work, identifying the problem we're trying to address, and then what are possible solutions. So I absolutely appreciate and agree with listening, and that we need to be good listeners to voices. And then it also needs to be in doing that listening, listen hard for what are the specific problems that we need to then address as a board or as a district, building, or whatever. So it just reminding me of what's our task.
You're good. Thanks. All right. So any further thoughts? I think we're good with SROs to move forward with the next topic. Vince, you want to speak a little bit about the resolution you're thinking of, and what you're thinking about?
Well, I'm just going to put it on the table and see if there's any appetite. I mean, we're seeing school districts all over the country taking up resolutions. Bend, I think 2 days ago, took up a resolution in alignment with supporting Black Lives Matter and saying it out loud and supporting that movement. And I feel it in my gut. I would love to take up a resolution because, the reality is that school boards are pretty limited in what they can do. We can hire a superintendent, we can adopt policies and approve budgets, and that's about it. So in this space, it's hard for us to take immediate action on anything. So saying something out loud feels good. And I think that there's a long history of decision-making bodies taking up resolutions or proclamations that have high-minded words that end up not seeing any action after them. And I'm not interested in that. I've talked a little bit tonight about, engaging the community and communicating and inviting folks that we historically haven't heard from into a process. So if we were going to consider taking up a resolution like that, I would be looking for a few things. That we would draft it in collaboration with our staff and students of color, with stakeholders of color in the community. If we didn't do that, I I don't think I could support that. I wouldn't consider a resolution of that nature that was drafted by maybe a couple of us on the board and then just presented. If we were going to do that, it would have to be an engaged process. It's really tempting to ride the wave of what's going on in the country right now around race. And it may last, but it may not. And, when the news cycle turns and, the names of people that have been killed by police fade in our memory, or certainly in the media's memory, we still have work to do. And we don't get to stop. And when, right now the wind would be at our back if we took up a resolution around Black Lives Matter, but maybe a year from now, that would turn into a headwind, and we have to be able to face that headwind when it's not popular to do anymore. And I think the last piece is that, I'm just really not interested in, if we were going to do that, I'd want to create a document that would help focus the attention and effort of this board and of the superintendent and staff on making substantive change on the subjective experience and the objective experience of people of color in our community and our children of color in our schools. So it would have to be rooted in action. There would need to be real actions attached to some sort of document like that. So these are my thoughts. I mean, I feel really strongly about it. I don't know if there's appetite with this board to engage in that work. There certainly is around talking about school resource officers, but this is bigger than just school resource officers. This is really opening the next chapter in the equity work that this school district is going to do. The reality is I started with this district in 2013 when it was really just starting to look hard at education outcomes. And we've done a lot of really good work. But I mean, if there's nothing that the last 2 weeks hasn't revealed, it's that we have a lot of work to do. I mean, I'm reminded of then Director Junkins' recounting of young Black men speaking candidly about their experience in our school district. And I'm haunted by that. And so I really think that we need to do something. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm just offering an invitation to engage with that and my support for work like that.
Any comments about it? And I have two thoughts about it. One of them is related to the proclamation that's under development through Ryan and his peer superintendents. Another thought I have is the equity policy, not really calling out race and not really following the lead of our staff. Like when attending training with the staff, they tell us race is the number one driver of inequities. If you fix the problem of how inequities are happening because of racial disparities or the systems that are creating racial disparities, you will be able to solve all other inequities more efficiently. And we don't call out race as clearly and as vividly in our equity policy. We could make a statement or at least give a direction even today to the staff to really drive the equity policy to be more centered around focusing on race and addressing racial issues. So these are the two thoughts I have. Lou?
Yeah, that was just a lot to think about. Thanks, Vince, for giving us a lot to think about. And some of the stuff that's standing out the most is like who are these statements for? Mm-hmm. Like, are they to make people feel good about themselves for saying something, or is it actually to create changes? that are needed. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. And so like, we absolutely, like, I will say this, I don't think there's any way you can absolutely, in any way, shape, or form, create a Black Lives Matter statement of solidarity and have school resource officers in schools. Like, that doesn't exist together. That's completely opposite of what Black Lives Matter stands for. And if people don't understand that, I encourage you to look it up and learn more. The ACLU has some great stuff about that. Black Lives Matter themselves have a lot of information about that. But like, those two things don't go together. And I think that's important for people to truly recognize. Like, you can't say one and you can't have both. That's not part of the same story. And I don't know, I have a lot to say about solidarity statements, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your thinking through it too, Vince, on but I really want us to think about like, who's the statement for and what is the long-term impacts? Because like you said, news headlines fade, some hashtags fade. Black Lives Matter isn't fading because that problem is going to be here until there's some larger system changes. But the lived experiences of especially the Black and African American students and families in our Corvallis community will continue to feel these negative impacts beyond the news cycles. And whether or not we're paying attention to it or reading about it, it's still happening. And it's happening for other students in the district as well, and families in the Corvallis area. And it's just something we really need to remember, like, it's still going to be here whether or not we're talking about it. And so the best we can do is try to change those experiences through policies and through system changes that the best we can. That's all.
Thanks. Jay, and then maybe Vince, if you want to reply to that. You're good? Okay, thank you. Jay?
I appreciate deeply Vince's raising this issue and want to have the board be really good listeners, but I am with Lou that listening and then doing, I'll grossly state it as a platitude or a broad statement of support for. I don't think that's the style that I've seen the board really get into. We've spent a lot of time over my 3 years working on our equity statement and then talking about specific things that we should do. Maybe we aren't on totally the right foot in some areas. So I think we need to listen for that, whether it's perception of students and safety. There was a speaker tonight about hiring practices. We've all talked about those issues. So I'm for looking at the specifics that we can do to help address the issues, but I'm not much into big statements. I'm more into, please, can we announce and do specifics?
Thank you. Sarah and then Vince.
Yeah, I appreciate what everyone has said. When we had our last board training, one of the things we were talking about was equity work and, racial justice. I don't think we were talking about racial justice specifically then, but we should be. And I made the comment then, and it's something that I think about a lot, is that I don't want to do something that allows us to pat ourselves on the back and not continue to do the work. And so I think we need to be careful about how, if we make some kind of resolution, how we do it. And we need to think about whether the energy we put into drafting a resolution might not be better spent doing something else that actually makes a direct change. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. Vince and then Tina.
Well, I'm really encouraged by you confirm my assumption that we're not interested in platitudes, and I'm not either. That's certainly not what I was suggesting. I'm much more interested in action. I mean, a resolution is just a vehicle to do something. We don't have to do that, but do something we must, and I do agree that we need we do need to focus on race. And I have notes here, what I wrote to myself was, if we can create a school system that consistently graduates Black boys to become smart, educated, confident, capable, proud Black men, then we will have made quantum leaps in doing the same for brown kids, kids of poverty, and queer kids, and whatever social factor you want to add in there. The last 2 weeks has really focused my attention. And so I'm happy to defer on the idea of a resolution or something like that, but I think that we need to think very hard about what we are going to do, with an emphasis on action and how we're going to focus our attention.
Okay. Tina, and then if there's no one else, I'll recognize myself. Tina?
I guess I just want to put out there that if we make a resolution, that we have to be absolutely committed to anti-racism work, not only as a board, but as a district, for our teachers and our staff and our administration. No change will come until we start digging deep into the roots of anti-racism work, looking into the systematic oppressive institutions. And then that's where the SRO comes in, the systematic of oppression, of how police forces came about, why did we adopt SROs to begin with? Are we ready to do that work? And if we are, then I'm willing to have these discussions. And I know our board is not for platitudes, but if we are for this resolution, we really have to focus on anti-racism work.
Thank you, Tina. Therese?
Thank you, Sammy. Yes, I would agree with Tina's sentiment. And I guess I would say my last comment that is new, I think, maybe it's new, I hope it's new, is that when we talk about engaging in a conversation about a school resource officer, in conjunction with what Lou said about the inconsistencies of something like the Black Lives Matter and movement and putting armed police officers inside our schools, is certainly a very important thing that we need to pay attention to. And what I want to highlight is that much like the discussion around defunding the police does not mean don't have anybody that can do anything when crime is taking place. Entertaining a conversation about removing a school resource officer does not necessarily mean that our school district has no relationship at all with law enforcement, or that law enforcement are not in any way allowed to be involved in the education of our youth or in helping to create safe spaces. What it's saying is that we want the opportunity to define what that's going to mean for our community. And we're in a box that has been defined this way for however long, because of whatever reasons, however it came to be. And if that box can't hold all of the people, then we need to get rid of it. And we need to reimagine what it would mean for our kids to feel safe, all of our kids to feel safe. And if some of our kids are feeling safe because there's an armed police officer in the buildings, and other of our kids are not feeling safe because there's an armed police officer in our buildings, we have a problem. And that is what we need to be looking at. Why does the presence of somebody who has an armed weapon lead to a feeling of security for some and not for others? And that conversation, I think that's the heavy work that Tina might be alluding to, about saying we need to see it through. We can't just say to the community, yeah, we support this, we want to be there for our students of color, and then not have the really hard conversation about the depth of privilege that allows some of us to stand behind an armed individual and say our lives are made safer by this, while others don't even get to stand behind them because the weapons are pointed at them. And that tension, that is the heart of why we must have this conversation around what's the function of this relationship? What do we want it to accomplish? Because if safety for our children is our goal, we clearly know that emotional safety is not being met for everyone right now. And I have to believe there is some way in which we do not have to choose one group over another in their ability to feel safe. And so I strongly support making a statement to our community. And I'm not going to in any way volunteer to take any kind of lead on that, because I am the wrong voice to do that. I am absolutely, my voice is to say, yeah, let's put the right people in charge of making that statement so it says what it needs to say. I don't think that that is me. It doesn't preclude other people on the board, but I don't think that that's me. And then let's commit to doing that work, which is to go back and say, we have to have this conversation about what a meaningful relationship with anybody that has power in any kind of related to any kind of criminal justice. What does it mean for them to have a relationship with us as an entity that is tasked with educating our children?
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think that it has to mean we never allow them to ever set foot in our buildings, but I do think that it means we have to seriously reimagine, what do we want them there for? And then, like this movement around defund, are armed people the right people for what we're wanting to have done there?
Mhm.
So anyway, that's it. I'll
Thank you. And I understand these two topics are very intertwined. The systems that play a role into racism and into our Black students, people, Black people at large, not feeling safe and not being safe. There are so many systems, and one of them now we're talking about is the SRO program and how it works. So I understand they are related and they talk to each other. So Tina, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick addition to what I was saying about being dedicated to anti-racism work. Not only just for our staff and administration and us as the board, but we also need to look at anti-racism and how we can in our curriculum and how we introduce it into our schools for our children. And so our families and our youth of color hear that they matter and that they see themselves and they're represented, and that we're dedicated to the work of understanding the systematic oppression that has happened for generations, and the generational trauma that it caused. And if we look at that and we bring it into our curriculum, I think, that's just something we need to be dedicated to as well. And if we're not, then we just need to say so.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to summarize. I can't summarize, but I'll try my best to summarize the discussion and a path forward, with some discussion with the community members and also some partners, including the Caucus of Color board members, Caucus of Board Members of Color in Oregon. They made a statement of solidarity, and actually I shared it with a couple of board members, and there was this sentiment from the caucus that they wanted to make a statement of solidarity, to say that this movement exists and it is legitimate, and we're acknowledging 400 years or more, much more, of oppression and racism that needs to stop, and we're committed to stop that. And then the next step immediately is the action. And at least in the statement of the solidarity, they made that distinguish, and they thought about it as two steps that you can't take one without the other, but you can't take only one and stop. So action is needed and is important. And I understand. I think I truly support that. We need to make an action. Right now, this discussion, if I would summarize our discussion, we are committed for anti-racist work in everything we do. We are committed to dismantle the systems that are oppressive to our Black students and students of color, Indigenous students, and faculty and teachers and educators, because that's the right thing to do. I believe all of us are committed. Now we're asking ourselves, how can we show that commitment? How can we say it and walk the talk? I want to suggest it's right there, and I think there are some community members in support of it, but I want to see what you think. If we can walk the talk by a clear statement tonight that we want by as soon as possible as the highest priority for us in terms of policy work, to make a statement in our policy that our decisions around curriculum, our equity work is anti-racist work, is grounded by anti-racism and grounded by really dismantling the systems of oppression. And equity is a step for us to reach justice. And we will never reach justice unless we acknowledge that our state of affairs in terms of race in our schools and in the country is not right. And if we can give a direction to the superintendent to do that, probably we'll be able to engage our staff, our students, and ourselves in a policy work that's immediate. And it's not now general equity, educational equity that we've been doing for a while, but as Vince mentioned, turning the page into mindful and deliberate work on anti-racism and calling out race. Would you be in support of that? Do you think this is the right first step to give that direction and have our staff to really look into what can we do in terms of policy to drive the biggest change or greatest change?
So in terms of policy, JBB is the educational equity policy. And I do think it's a place where the board may want to look to see if race is called out in such a way that you feel is adequate. My sense is that you may not, and that might be a spot to spend some time and intention. So I hear what Sammy's saying, and as I look at it, I don't know that it's called out to the degree that you are all talking about tonight. It's also been a conversation that I've had with several community members about that policy, and does it speak loud enough? And so I do think that might be an area for you. If I've heard you say two things. One is some sort of statement, and also is the policy. And so I'm just thinking that if you are leaning towards the policy development area, that's the policy that I would encourage you to spend some time talking about and working through.
Vince?
So it wasn't my intention to try to push the board to give direction to the superintendent. I was trying to introduce an idea, and I maybe I need to back up and say, thank you for indulging me in this conversation. And I really appreciate the conversation that we've had. This is deliberative work. Policy is deliberative work. It takes time. Community engagement takes time. And I think that that's a big part of this, is that we need to have the patience to take action that matters, that is thoughtful, and will have the impact that we would like. So, I mean, well, I think looking at the equity policy is a good place. My desire would be to see this on our next meeting and continue this conversation. But I think I would rather to have everybody here sit with this. It's now 10:01. I don't think any of us are operating at our optimum level. I'd also like to hear from staff. They've been doing a lot of this work as well. And I would like us to go and have conversations with people that are close to us and get grounded, and then come back and have a deeper conversation about this, and then talk about what actions we want to take and how we want to move forward. Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jay.
I'm just going to go back to what I thought I heard a couple of us say, which is I really also want Ryan and staff to go figure out ways to listen to students and their parents. Because we can say as a principal or as a staff member, we're doing great things. We're doing as best we can. But right now I'm sort of swinging at shadows because I don't really know what are the kids afraid, thinking, point to concrete issues, or maybe that isn't concrete. Again, the issue of staff of color, that's a concrete thing, but what else are they thinking? And I know we're now moving into summer, and that's a hard thing to get people together, but I would like to know maybe next meeting how Ryan and school people would facilitate conversations with students of all backgrounds and parents.
Thank you. So how would you like us to conclude this conversation? Knowing that it can't be concluded tonight. Vince?
Can we commit to continuing this conversation in our, the next available meeting? That's going to be August.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a retreat in August.
Yes. Lou, and then Sarah.
Can we just like make a commitment to dedicate time to this? And I still don't know all the rules around that, like how our meetings are structured. Is there a special meeting that can be called, that kind of stuff? So is this worth calling a special meeting for? Would be my question. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and I would like to defer to staff. Everything with costs of staff time, we could call for a meeting with a notice. And personally, I believe this is important and worth our time. I want to consult with Ryan if making the commitment, but without a very specific timeline or week. Is that okay if we could meet sometime in the summer?
So I think that we would, can you give me a chance to talk to staff about that? Again, I think we will tend to be around more this summer than most. And at the same time, we're trying to, let me work with staff. Yeah. I don't think that's absolutely not a no, but I just want to make sure that people are available. And I think it's important that we have some of our district leadership involved in the conversation. And I want to make sure that they're available to do that.
Absolutely. And so I can give you a commitment, Lou, that I'll be working closely with Ryan and Sarah to make sure we prioritize that as practicable as possible, not as convenient as possible, as convenient as it is. So we'll push hard to meet as practical and as soon as possible.
And is that the sense from the overall board?
Yes, thank you.
I want to make sure that that's the case. I think it is, but I just didn't know.
Thank you. Could I have a straw poll if this is the sense of the board? Thank you. So I do have a unanimous straw poll. Yes. So from Sarah.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think
you're muted. Oh, sorry. You're good.
Okay. That I think really looking carefully at our policy and where we can enact policy changes that can change structural systems that are creating injustices is a slower process, but actually way more meaningful than something we could do quickly. So although it's frustrating not to be able to say, hey, we're doing this thing, I would rather see us do something that actually accomplishes something and means something and is the change that needs to happen rather than the thing that we feel like we'd like to make happen.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there's no stronger statement that we can make other than or more than making a systemic change, and policies are the systemic changes that's we've been waiting years to happen. And so thank you. All right, with that, I know we've been warned out and we did not talk about reopening. I would say probably in terms of engagements with reopening, it's something that will continue to happen. Ryan has been committed to really keep us up to date and update the community as soon as possible whenever we have decisions and we have information. So it's been heard. I want to ask one question briefly. We all received an email from a political group or from someone on behalf of political group. They're having a rally for children, and they asked us possibly individually to speak on Saturday in a rally about this same topic. And I've been conflicted or contemplating whether to speak at all, or if I would speak on my personal behalf or representing the board. If I would be speaking on behalf of the board, I would like to see a straw poll from you if you think that's appropriate. And if I would be doing that, I'll be committing to this conversation that we just had, talking about the guiding principles and the policies we have. And it is the time to really listen, but not only listen, to act. I am very aware, even though I am a board member or a chair of a board, I am not a person with Black experience, and I have to be very mindful of it. Also, I am contemplating about children in a rally have two sides of it. Student voice and children voice should be heard, but also we haven't been reached out to possibly by an organization that's students led per se. So these are the thoughts on my mind as I process this. So Tina?
I just want to throw this out there for consideration. This is a Black Lives rally in March for the Children. And since we have nothing concrete for our anti-racist work, I don't think it would be appropriate for any of us to be speaking on a Black Lives Matter rally when it should be only for voices for Black folks and people who are a part of the Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Tina. Anyone else, or maybe a straw poll with Tina's statement? Vincent, then Therese.
Yeah, Sammy, I'm just going to relate the conversation we had a day ago, talking about this very subject. As I considered what I would say at a Black Lives Matter rally as a white man that is on a school board and for a rally for children, I was just really flummoxed as to what I would say. And the reality, what I came down on is that I would want to hear from the children. I would want to be there to listen. I wouldn't want to be there to speak. And I concur with Tina Baker's statement. We are not, our position around anti-racist work is not coherent enough to take it public. And I think that we should wait and do the work that we need to do for ourselves and for our organization and make sure that we're aligned and doing the right work.
Thank you. Thank you. Therese?
I agree with both. I don't think that we have done, we haven't done the work that would really warrant bringing a perspective as a school board.
Mm-hmm.
And I would feel more comfortable going and speaking if someone asked me to talk about it from a human developmental science perspective,
Mm-hmm.
Not as a mother of a white child who is highly unlikely to ever experience any of the things that have so I don't have words for that, so I'm just going to stop there. So I would not speak out as a mother.
Okay.
And I would not speak out as a school board member at this time either.
Lou?
I think for me that a lot of times when there's these asks to talk at some of the marches right now is that it's okay to say no to them, and for a couple of reasons. One, if we're not speaking from a place that has experience that is going to really speak to what it is. I don't think this one is a Black Lives Matter one, though. It's a Children's March for Racial Justice, which is slightly different, right? So I would point that out, even though it's probably inspired by the Black Lives Matter marches. So that's a whole nother level of complexities too, right? Like to think about, but also because we're still experiencing COVID, and like I personally can't go out to go talk at things and risk exposure, even though people are wearing masks at them and stuff like that. It's just like one of those things, like that's a reality that we're still living in. So I think those are the two things to think about. Like, is that something we can actually talk about? And also, like, there's still COVID, not to use it as like an excuse to not participate in things, but sometimes people feel pressured. I know as somebody that's really actively engaged in community organizing work, that it's really hard to not go to these things. But sometimes you have to like say it's okay because other people are going to be doing that right now. And so I just felt that was important to point that part out too.
Thank you. So yeah, if there's no objection, I'll reply and thank them for the invitation, but also state that we want to hear from the children, and it's not our place at this time to take the space, if that's okay. Jay.
I agree with what was stated, that we shouldn't go. I don't agree that we haven't done work. We've done a lot of work, but I don't think, frankly, that it can stand in front of a group in that nature and have impact. So I'd rather be listeners and sorting out what the issues for us are that we need more work on, but I don't think it's a good thing to go visit.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I'll do my best to be a listener there, and I know some might be there to listen. And I appreciate, to Lou, the statement you mentioned. We have to be very careful that we encourage people, including children, to practice safety and observe their public health safety as well as we go out. That's a very important reminder. Well, with that, any further comments or things that you want to consider for future board agenda? And I listed everything that, yes.
Can you send me the request from the students? I was speaking to, or I got an email from Jason Dorsett from NAACP asking about connecting with that group in that march, so that they could provide support or perspective. And so, but I didn't have that. I don't think I have that. So if you could send that to me, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I can just make the connection.
Absolutely. I believe they send it to individual board member emails, so I'll forward it to you right away. Will do. Awesome. All right, thank you. So we do have election of board officers, between years, discussion, SROs, the discussion around Black Lives Matter and supporting our students of color. Anything else you want to see on a future board agenda? Thank you very much. I want to appreciate staff. Thank you. Happy retirement, Julie. You got a flavor of a long meeting. So again, thank you so much. And I want to say we appreciate all of the work that you've done and your patience with us tonight as well.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
We just had to keep you here as long as possible.
Any further discussion items for the good order of business?
Sammy, we can't even get our words straight. So I think you have to call it, my friend.
All right. Seeing there is no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.